Okay, we'll call the meeting to order and we'll start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. We'll start the meeting with the approval of the agenda. Dan, any additions or corrections?
I have none.
Dwayne?
None for me.
Ryan? No? Tim? I got these two here.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, we're gonna add A2G bulk water rate, and then, under F3, fire station schematic design. It's in everybody's packet. It's in the Dropbox right now. With that, entertain a motion to approve as changed.
Make the motion.
Thanks, Ryan. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. Any questions for administration on that?
Move to approve.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to, I don't have any slips here, so, public hearing, petition for annexation. That's, number, let's see, E1 in your packet. Tim, could you give us a little background on that before we open the public hearing?
So including your packet,
Thank you.
you've got a council action sheet. Background, Les Conway, WSE, submitted a application on behalf of Don Marty, owner, for annexation of Petition, approximately 21.39 acres. And you can read that to yourself. We've discussed this a little bit in brief earlier this year, and I know Brad's got some items included in there as well. So, Brad, do you want to highlight anything before we start the hearing?
Yeah, I can highlight a few things. Let me just talk about the location. I think in the council action report, we tried to highlight the biggest concerns that staff had, and you all got a chance to see the concept plan in review discussion a couple meetings ago. Our biggest concern is kind of the piecemeal development pattern that we see here and the complications it creates for us as staff and you as council when developments come in this piecemeal order trying to establish an orderly and cost-effective approach to infrastructure development. So what they're proposing is, right now this is one parcel here with a small inset, which is the first bed parcel, and they're proposing to annex just 26 acres of this entire parcel, which is just a small portion in the northeast corner of that. The development that they would have talked about is a single-family development pattern, larger lots than what you see in the existing Linden Manor subdivision, one of the first subdivisions. And they would phase it in over two phases, with the first phase being on the north end and the second phase being on the south end of it. All of the traffic would go to the north through this neighborhood from this development. And the biggest challenge that we have as staff is when projects come in a piecemeal way like this, as they happen, then you get down to where you have to build that more collector street system, and you all of a sudden get pushed back and the economics aren't there to do it, and we need more help to build those major roads. Now there is certainly a need for these more collector streets that feed traffic out of the neighborhood onto the collector street system. That the cost sharing for those needs to go beyond the property, because certainly there are regional benefits to it. But from a standpoint of how development happens, we would like to see the entire parcel here be annexed in. Ideally, we would like to see all of the property in this area be annexed in as it starts to develop. But instead, we have this pattern that starts to come here, develop down, and then we have this gap. And so it's just a better pattern when all of it's brought in at once. And I know the applicants disagree with that. And they chose to move forward despite our staff comments to say bring it all in at once. After they annex, they still need to get a comprehensive plan amendment, and we've talked about that through the concept plan process, where that amendment seems reasonable to do it, to flip it from industrial to residential. And then they would also need rezoning to a single-family residential district. When they annex it, it'll come in as a holding zone until such time as they proceed with the platting process, the comp plan amendment, and the rezoning. So those are kind of the issues that we have. We have a lot of infrastructure-related matters that they're aware of from a flooding standpoint and stormwater management standpoint. But when we think about this collective area, it makes more sense for us to do it all as one rather than the piecemeal manner. So that's staff's position on this. certainly welcome any questions and discussion you have.
Thanks, Brad. Anybody on council have anything before we open the public hearing?
I was just curious how many lots were in there. I was just trying to count it, but...
In the proposal,
Yeah.
I think they have 20 lots in the first phase and 20 lots in the second phase, roughly.
Okay. I mean, obviously, just looking at it, my concern is, like we talked about when Mr. Marty was here last time, with cutting that at an angle and just leaving it off of 8th. I mean, I know, we all know why that is, but so I'll just leave that there. I'm not a fan of that, so if anybody else got anything off the top of their head first?
Is this how we ended up in the problem that we have in the area where you live, where there's one street in and out? Was it continuous, multiple, piece-by-piece development?
That was before my time, I have no idea.
I would say, Councilmember, I think that's a fair conclusion to our comments and the issues we run into. And we know that in a community like Casson, where you're starting to see this increased growth pressure, but the market's not quite there for, and the reason the applicants are doing this is the market's not there for them to be able to build all that infrastructure and hold it until all those lots are taken down. If we saw a lot more pressure for those lots to be taken down quicker, then it would be more easy for a developer to build all that street infrastructure at once, but it's not easy for them to do that. What we would like to see is it brought in annexation. When they plat it, you plat the whole property, even if it's a phased final plat, you plat it as outlots with the streets in there, so you know that that's what's going to be there when they go to build it. And you simply build it in more of a piecemeal fashion, but it's platted and designed in a more holistic fashion.
And I will say, we did require that for the additional Casson Meadows subdivisions. So they're building it in a piecemeal fashion, but we required that entire thing to be platted when we did that last year. And that'd be in contrast to some of the other developments that you might be referencing. For example, some of the ones we've dealt with in the last year or two, so.
Well, I mean, what springs to mind is the issue that we had with the road that goes into that area, where there's one road, and we had this place full of folks that were not pleased that we needed to construct a road that crosses the bike path. And I would like to avoid that for future councils, because that was, to say unpleasant is an understatement.
Right.
We had folks that accused us of creating a dangerous condition, when the simple fact of the matter was, it just, there's one way in and one way out.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open the public hearing regarding the petition for annexation of, is it Linden in the Manor? So if anybody has anything to say, if you want to come up, give us your name and address, and...
Want me to come up now?
If you want to, yeah. Yep. Yep.
I think that's a question that you might have.
I'm Mike Marty, 63793 250th Avenue. I did bring the applicant with tonight, so if you have any questions for him, but otherwise I can answer most of them. I guess the reason that we're doing this way is a couple reasons. One, we want to maintain the rural nature of most of that land if we can. Second off, we're annexing about twice what we need, and probably 4 times what will be needed anytime in the near future. And the other reason for not annexing to 8th is because we don't want to build 8th right now. The market isn't there, the money isn't there to do that. So why annex to the center of a road, and then we end up in here being forced to pay for a road down the road, so to speak. So that's part of my argument against that. We could annex less if that was more of a benefit to the city. We could do 11 acres, that's all we're looking for this development to begin with. So The reason that we annexed this much was just so that we knew that we would be to the construction limits of that development, so. I don't know if you have any other questions that way.
Questions from Mr. Marty? Anybody? Any questions, though? No. I guess I'll just the way it just angles down like that, and I'm not a
Right, so
a person, I mean, I get why, I understand you don't need all of it. It's just that someday in the future, when this gets developed south of there, or wherever it's at, those folks are all gonna have to pay for that road. But the folks in this subdivision that you're doing right now will also benefit from it, but have paid zero for it.
that's how every other street in town is built, though, is the
Yeah, but you're
argument.
taking a rectangle piece and saying, we're just gonna angle it away from the road so it doesn't touch the road, so you don't have to improve it, but the rest of that 21 acres could be improved with no cost going into that road. Right? I mean, but
True,
eventually when it gets...
but those lots are not, they're not abutting that property, that street. Eighth is not being developed at this point, so why are we trying to pay for it at this point, is my question.
Anything you got?
If I could just add one comment here, and Brandon or Tim, you can correct me if I misstate this, but I don't believe that requiring it all to be annexed leads to us building it tomorrow. Requiring it all to be annexed means that when we come in to do the preliminary plat for those first phases, we can do a preliminary plat to really lay it all out so that we understand how it all happens and how future phases connect to those collector roads. But then you final plat it in phases, and that final platting, depending upon how that's done, when that road is needed, that's when you pay for that road. So, yes, you can probably do a portion of this without creating a connection over to 8th Avenue, but at some point in time, and possibly that second phase, we're going to want to have a second alternative outlet for that traffic, because otherwise all of that traffic goes through an existing single-family residential neighborhood. And to the extent that we can find ways to get traffic to collector roads rather than shuttling it through an existing neighborhood, that's good planning, and so that's what we want to do. The building of that road happens, obviously when development warrants it and needs it, and we would do that when ultimately these other plats happen. But to the extent that we can manage a preliminary platting process, it's easier for us as a community if it's all in the city limits than if some of it's in the city and some of it's in the township.
So Brad, what you're saying is, take that rectangle there, you could annex that whole section, whatever you want to call it, parcel, just develop the east 11 acres, or for lack of a better description, and that 11 acres with those 20 units, whatever's going to be there, wouldn't necessarily have to pay for 8th.
Not
correct?
True, yes, but it would be at least laid out in the preliminary plat that we know how the roads and streets are going to be connected. It still leaves us with the problem when you do your final platting, and we can probably address this in the development agreement. Ultimately, the property owners that are benefiting from 8th Avenue are the ones who are going to pay for it. And right now, it's mostly the Marty family that owns land on both sides, plus the Firstad property here. And so ultimately, they're going to be the ones that fund most of the improvements of 8th Avenue to the extent that it's a local street. Above that, then it becomes a question of how we fund the rest of that expansion if it's more of a collector street, which it would likely be. And that would happen when they do the final platting. And so as they do the final platting, we have development agreements that stipulate the public improvements, and as they continue to build that out, in the planning process, we figure out how the roads get built.
Okay. Thanks, Brad. Anything you got, Brandon?
No, I think Brad very well
Covered.
covered it, so.
Okay. Okay.
So still, though, the properties along 8th Avenue are still gonna be paying for 8th, either
Right.
way.
Yeah, I got you.
So I don't see where the big difference is whether we annex it all now or leave part of it and then do more later. I don't see where there's a difference with that.
Well, part of it, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you annex up to a point, that 5 acres might never get annexed in, and that road will never get connected. This is the problem, and then there's no connector street.
Okay, but if we don't annex on the west, then who pays for that half of the street?
It's gonna be,
Because that's not happening anytime soon, so
And I just want to emphasize a couple things here. One, Right now, the property to the west is not requesting anything, so there's no entitlement request. The property to the east is requesting something, and you're requesting to annex a portion of that property in. And so a portion of that creates this challenge for us as we do orderly development down the road. And that's why we're saying, because you're making this request now, we as a city have the authority to say an orderly development pattern would be annexing the whole thing in, planning for the whole thing. You just annex a piece of it in. We could certainly allow that, but it creates problems for us in the planning and development side down the road. And if there's questions about we want to retain a rural character and we want to retain, we don't want to pay higher taxes, those things can be resolved through the annexation process. It can't be resolved that you're now in the city of Canton versus the township. So those things are things we can address, but that's why we want to do it, from a staff perspective.
Thanks, Brad. So, Mike, so if the whole thing was annexed in and you could just develop the 11 acres that you need for your first phase, how does that hurt you if it's all brought in?
Because I have a neighbor who I've made a promise to.
Oh. Okay.
I have actually two neighbors I've made a promise to.
Okay.
I mean, the inset lot, I mean, we wouldn't force annexation for that either.
Right, yeah.
I mean, just so that's clear, I mean, he could still remain in the township.
Yeah, that's, nobody on that road is interested in that scenario, so that's where we're at.
Okay. But I mean, if you squared up that rectangle before you got down to Fiersted's place, that doesn't bring his into the city.
True.
Right, I mean, I'm just talking that rectangle that has the little, just do it over to 8th if you can.
The only reason to annex at that angle like that was because we have stormwater we have to deal with, and we're not sure if we have to do it on the east side or the west side of the creek. Otherwise, that line would have simply followed the creek. We just moved it to the west to ensure that we were within the construction limits. So, there's still plenty of property depth there along 8th for development to pay for 8th whenever that happens, which would likely be at the same time that anything on the west side would happen.
Right.
So that's the reason for that, is to contain this, that street will get paid for when all of that is done, more than likely at a very, similar time frame versus right now, which is years away at a minimum.
Okay. Anything else you got?
Oh, I think...
Do you need anything, questions for Mike or comments?
No.
Dan, anything else?
No.
Thanks.
No.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks, Don. Come on up.
Don Marty, 63797 250th Avenue. I am the landowner. My first question is hypothetical. If Mike were to purchase 21 acres from Brian Herbst, how much land would Brian have to annex? Since we don't want to do piecemeal.
There's too many things that we take into consideration when you're looking at an annexation, that you can't do hypotheticals.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if you'd need to do 30 or 53 acres. The other question I guess I have is, if I annex an extra 32 acres, what's the benefit to me? I understand the benefit to the city, but what would be the benefit to me?
You would get lots to develop. You could do your first phase.
Oh, so we're holding the first phase over the whole thing. Okay.
So can I just...
The other benefit is if and when you choose to do another phase of development, you don't have to go through the annexation process. That process is done, and time is usually a pretty significant benefit.
Yeah. I guess as many years as it probably would be before the next annexation, that probably won't concern me.
And it's hard to know that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Don. All right, anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Okay. So, we've got that petition for annexation there. I don't, planning and zoning, anything from your guys' perspective that you guys have?
No, the general discussion, what I recall, was that they felt that the whole thing needed to come in for the reasons that Brad explained, and that we need to have the ability to plan streets appropriately, and without the platting process to have that opportunity to do that, then, you know, we get into problems that we've had to deal with in the past. The annexation, other than promises may be unkept, I don't see that it has any bearing on 8th Avenue at all, because the cost only comes into play when you start talking about the platting process and the final plat. So the cost of 8th Avenue, to me, has no bearing on whether we do go forward with the annexation, if we choose to do the whole thing or not do any of it at all.
Okay.
One thing that, just to take into account also would be the, you know, the extra cost. I think Mr. Marty talked about, you know, what's the benefit to him, what is the cost to him. I've heard this from other developers, you know, what am I getting, you know, for this land that's not platted, that's an outlot. You know, at a staff level, there are things we can do to eliminate the extra taxes that would be on that property, you know, and those might come to council as, maybe we would abate back taxes for a certain period of time, you know, because, I mean, obviously, it's a farm field. We're not looking to make, you know, it's not a tax revenue that was driving any of this. So those are things that could be reconciled, I think, without creating a bigger issue. I mean, to be honest, if they bought the whole parcel and they did part of it at this time, the other parcel, you know, portion of the parcel, we could review and see if we can make sure that that's not an issue for them going forward.
I guess what I was looking at was, when I was talking, wasn't the whole piece. I was just looking at that north property line of the Fierstead property, of just squaring up that rectangle. So you just didn't have that triangle sitting there, is what I was looking at, rather than the whole thing surrounding the Fierstead over the 8th. I don't know if that's a compromise that we can, I mean, to me, it just didn't make sense to have that angle there if we don't have to worry about excessive costs on developing 8th on this particular deal for them, because I get where you're only putting so many houses, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, I mean, you know, from my perspective, and I'm not a developer, I mean, the thought would be, if you're gonna take that entire portion, say the north portion, you would develop 8th that coincides alongside of that portion at the same time. And then you would build up the bottom part, the southernmost part of 8th to coincide with the south parcel when it's brought in, if you were gonna do that. I mean, to me, that would make sense, you know, just from a development. You want development to pay for the development, and that's the problem we run into some of these other developments, where we leave the last piece doesn't have enough value to cover the cost of the infrastructure that needs to go in, and that's the issue you run into.
Okay. Do you have something?
Yeah, just maybe add to Tim's point, you know, the past discussion of the council level development paying for development. We're likely gonna have a development coming forward in the south end of town that has a road similar to this, half of the right-of-way or half of the roadway is in that platted limits. And we're likely going to be, or have approached the developer while paying for half that road as a future improvement, because we don't have the other half. So depending on kind of how we slice it and dice it here, could be a discussion to kind of keep things fair, and then keep the development paying for development concept that we have, something we could talk about, and I think Dwayne mentioned it through the planning process, but just understand that is in play. And the more that you know, don't plat in that area, then that kind of piece of the pie, or that piece of the development that would have half of this road in the platted limit is reduced, and that's the problem, or the situation we get in the northeast part of town with the Blaine property. So just want council to be aware of those as they make decisions, that those were two issues that we kind of have out here to kind of make everything kind of the same, and kind of relate the different developers to the same kind of principles and standards, so.
Okay. Thanks, Brandon. Any other comments?
I just got a question. The property to the north, that this abates to, abuts to, that's already residential. Is there more than one way in and out of that? Because if there's not, now we're adding another 20, potentially to 40.
There are two exits. There's two,
Okay,
there's two
okay.
there, yep.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't adding and then...
One on Old
adding
34 and then one to 8th, yep.
You have two, but it's, the more traffic we put into this area, we don't want to see all of that traffic going through this neighborhood to get out to the collector streets. We'd like to be able to get it out to a collector street. We'll have an alternative to go out to a different route.
At least at some point in the future.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah, it might be the second phase that you require that connection.
And that's where I was getting at with squaring up that rectangle, so the whole thing. You could then make sure the street does go out there for future development, that you have that platted to do that. Or am I not understanding that correctly?
Most likely we won't. We'll try to minimize the number of new streets that cross this major draw. And so it would probably be something further to the south that then can connect over here and have continuity to Fifth Street. So we probably wouldn't push something through here if we don't have to. But that creates a challenge with how they've laid it out, and I don't know that that works well with their development plans. So that'll be something that we'll have to work out through the planning process. And again, if we only annex this much of it, then without going through another annexation process, we don't really have options to figure out how that happens. And that's why I'm encouraging that it be done that way, so that when we go through the planning process, we're planning property that's all within Casson, not, gee, how do we plat some property that's within Casson and then do other improvements that are in the township?
Okay, thanks, Brad. Anybody else have anything? I'm gonna recommend to the council that, we kick this back to the administrator and have some more discussions with the Martys and, see if we can hammer something out there.
Okay, Brad, how does that work with our timelines, if they want to table tonight?
I don't know that the land use application timelines are the same for annexation. Are they, Melanie, the 60-day? I don't think the 60-day review is for annexation requests, is it?
Boy, that's a good question.
I know that if we need to, we can extend it, but
I will see if
I'll have to review that.
Answer to that quick.
So once they apply, we only have so many days to...
Well, potentially. I mean, we send them a letter extending the another 30 days if we needed to. So tabling is a possibility, but... I mean, I guess from...
My gut says no, but I have the statute pulled up here.
I think the only reason to table would be if you are taking a look at this application and you're saying that, I mean, if this was rejected, you would have and you wanted to come, for example, taking that triangle in, that would be a new application. It would not be this application, so it would be a new application. So the hearing we're having tonight would have to be reheld because it would be changed. So, I mean, I guess that would be one, reasoning to think about it too.
Oh, we could just say no and then come back.
Right, you'd say, it depends on what the council wants to do.
Right.
I mean, if I'm not sure what other purpose it would serve.
The statute is vague enough where it says, request means a written application related to zoning, septic systems, watershed district review, soil and water conservation district review, or the expansion of a metropolitan urban service area for a permit, license, or other governmental approval of an action. So it doesn't, in those, it's not zoning, it's not a septic system, it's not watershed, it's not soil and water. It's not the expansion of a metropolitan urban service area, but it is a request for an other government. I don't think it applies to annexation. That's my...
So we could table it or not?
Yeah, I think you could.
Okay.
And I think the city can give itself an extension of the 60 days. I don't think that has to be...
If we needed to, yep.
If we needed to, so, maybe you just extend it. Maybe you make a motion to extend it for 30 days or 60 days and revisit it.
Right, well, I'm just thinking, if, you know, like you said, there's things we can do if you did annex more in.
Either way, it's, we go back and discuss it, we get it back to you soon. This isn't a delay for the next month or so. It's, we'll discuss it, we'll get it back to you in the next meeting.
Yeah, that would be the goal, would be if you chose to table tonight, I would expect you to have feedback from me that I can then use to discuss it with the developer.
Okay.
That would be my expectation from council, because otherwise, I mean, I need your direction on this, and so does the other staff, so.
Yep.
It appears as though the extension can be given just by giving written notice of that. It's required to direct staff to give the notice if it's necessary.
Okay. Well, I would like to see some discussions about, I mean, I understand the benefits of all of it, I get that. Is if you could just do that top triangle to square it up so we could plat a road, a future road through there, so you knew you could do it. Because with that triangle there, you may never get it and develop the whole thing. So that's what I'd like to have staff discuss. Anybody else have anything else? And you can discuss I understand bringing in more land and having that be taxable. You can have the discussion on what we can do to abate that as well.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, I've always been of the position that we need to do a better job of planning our streets, and I think not moving forward on this is the right thing to do.
Okay, Dan, anything?
No,
Oh.
I'm good.
Right?
I think the one thing I took out of a lot of what was said today is the orderly annexation, to do it all at once is what Brad suggested, and it just, from what I'm hearing from everyone, that just seems like an important point to continue planning ahead. So that's a big stickler for me, I think.
Okay. Mel, anything? Okay, all right. I'd make the motion to table this to the next meeting, direct administration to do what we just talked about, and bring it back at the next meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And thanks, Don and Mike, for coming. Appreciate it. Okay, committee reports. Number 1, 4th Avenue Lane Apartments.
All right. So planning and zoning did discuss this at their most recent meeting. They've discussed it a number of times. And council has also seen the items related to that previously. At their meeting on Monday, the planning and zoning, after review, did forward a recommendation for the council to evaluate this. And they believe at the meeting, that it was something the council should review, and they felt that it was by forwarding it was a positive recommendation on the rezone for this property. And then you've got a number of items in your packet there. You could take a look at the resolution, or the ordinance rather. You're looking at a dense development. This would allow for additional townhomes as well as apartment complex. Brad, I don't know if you want to run through some of these items too.
Yeah, I can kind of just briefly walk through the high-level review of this and some of the issues, and I think what I'll just do is walk through maybe just kind of walk through the ordinance. This is a PUD, and as a PUD, essentially, we're saying if you as an applicant can provide some broader benefits to the community, then we allow the ability to be flexible on some provisions within the zoning code. So in this particular case, this development project received an approval for a PUD back in, I think, 2018 or 2019. At the time, included a series of twin homes or attached townhomes in 3-unit buildings, I think, or maybe 4-unit buildings. And the southern portion of that development was a vacant parcel. It was platted as a lot and block. Subsequent to that, the Mr. Tom, bringing in an apartment, multifamily housing project, essentially a 3-story over a parking area that would make up the remaining piece of that PUD development. In order to do that, they needed to amend the PUD. In amending the PUD, they're essentially requesting for some leniency when it comes to some of the setback provisions. And in order to do that, they have to provide 30% open space, and they need to show some kind of broad benefit. The broad benefit to the community is it provides alternative housing pattern that's not real prevalent in the city. There is certainly some multifamily housing. This provides a new multifamily housing building in stock. And the location of it proximate to schools and primarily proximate to jobs, because there's a lot of teachers and people who work at schools, is a reasonable place for a development like this. You can walk to it, it's walkable, and provides more affordable housing for teachers and other people at school facilities. So that kind of passes the test in the Planning Commission's eyes, in our eyes, of what does it provide unique to the community. It is a tight squeeze, and so they're fitting a lot of things into the site. They do meet the parking requirements for the multifamily housing piece of this, but those parking requirements are on the lower minimum side, but they do meet them. They are within the building height for the R3 district when we think of multifamily development, so they don't need to deviate from that particular aspect of the code. It's more about the setbacks where they start to push the envelope in terms of being a very tight development. And maybe I'll pull up the site plan so you can see it. Concerns that were expressed at the public meetings were relative to the density, mostly just the density, and concerns about, with that many units, their concerns were relative to traffic in the area. Relative to that, the traffic in the area, we have a neighborhood here where you have several schools, and I don't care how good of a traffic management designer you are in terms of the facilities, you're always going to have congestion during those school periods where school is starting or ending, and you have an elementary and middle school dropping off young kids, in a high school where you've got young drivers. So this project really doesn't add to traffic to the point where all of a sudden it tips the scale on level of service or operations. The facilities around it are designed to manage that. There is concern, obviously, about conflicts with lots of pedestrian traffic, and so one of the conditions we talked about, this is the apartment building, or the multifamily housing building. They have a driveway that would extend out and would cross, access on 5th Avenue would cross a major trail. And so we said we need to make sure there's some kind of very obvious signage that raises people's awareness that when they're coming out of this area, they need to be looking left and right for people on the sidewalk. There's concerns about the traffic movement in the broader area that I think the city just needs to monitor and manage as part of the whole school traffic management scenario. And so I don't think there's anything that needs to be done from a street design or street configuration relative to this PUD. I recognize it's a concern, and it's pretty much always going to be a concern. The one question that came up through the process was this private drive, which was approved as part of the original PUD. You've got 9 or 10 parking spaces here that are going to serve the multifamily building, and then 33 units for the remaining parking spaces will be underground here in the apartment building. So you have some that are going to access this way and some that will exit this way. So it really does a good job of dispersing the traffic, not being sent to one particular area. However, there is concern, this is a private street, it's 24 feet, and there is concern every time we have a private street, mostly from fire and EMS, that even if we say you need to post this for no parking, the city doesn't typically enforce parking on private streets. We've been in conversations with Joe, the police chief, and one of the things I think we'll be bringing forward to you in the not-too-distant future is an ordinance, city code amendment that enables the police department to enforce parking on private streets for fire and emergency service reasons. I don't know how exactly that happens, but I know that some city ordinances actually have that explicitly laid out in their codes, and so we think we can strengthen the ability to manage those kinds of circumstances. The other big issue on this property is the XL utility easement. If you've been out by it, you've seen the modifications to an existing townhome that has a permit pulled where they're building, and it became apparent as they got into it that there's an easement here that wasn't originally laid out in the plan. That easement is XL Energy easement, and the way the buildings are laid out right now, you see that the proposed building on the northeast quadrant here actually is encroaching into that easement area. So we did add a condition after the Planning Commission meeting to the ordinance that, oh, I can't remember where that verdict is, that basically stipulates, I think I have that in here somewhere.
Section 4, number 5.
Oh, looks like I have the wrong ordinance in the packet.
No, it's at the very end.
Oh, it's the planning commission one, yeah. So section 4, number 5, in the actual ordinance for consideration, has a provision there that essentially says Xcel Energy, will have to provide some kind of written authorization to do that, or they need to modify the site plan, and modifying the site plan will essentially remove this northerly piece outside of the Xcel Energy easement. So we have that as a condition in the ordinance, that's for your consideration. If it's not in the packet, I know we have it, and Melanie has a copy of that as well. Let's see. So, one thing to emphasize, taking action on this today, if you were to approve this as a preliminary PUD, it is preliminary PUD, but approving it is essentially approving the zoning. And so we would be rezoning it from its current PUD flex district to PUD R3. And the rezoning is the ordinance plus the site plan that you have here. Now, the next thing that they have to do is they have to come forward with a final PUD plan. And the final PUD plan essentially is addressing the conditions we've identified in the ordinance, and it is establishing the construction drawing. So then they have to go to the next step of actually doing the work to put the construction documentation together and all the civil plans that Brandon would review. In that process, if they determine that that Xcel easement means they have to shuffle this around or move that building down, they can do that, and then we would produce the final PUD plan. We look at it, we say, is it generally consistent with the preliminary PUD? And if it's generally consistent, we can approve the final PUD plan, and this becomes then what the regulating map is. So there still is a step they have to go through to address the final conditions that we have in the ordinance. I think that's most everything. If you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Thanks, Brad.
I do actually have a question. So you're saying in the future, we're looking at potentially making enforcement for the fire and the police for private streets. Now, are there going to be designated private streets, or is it going to be somebody's driveway that, I mean...
No.
We got to make...
Streets, yeah, it would just be streets that are... So many times you have these planned unit developments where you've got townhomes or condominiums where the association manages the common ground, and the city doesn't want to get into dealing with some of those narrower streets and shorter streets. And so we have an HOA. The question is, who enforces the parking if all of a sudden fire and emergency needs to get in there? So it would just be for these PUD developments where we allow or we permit private streets that are narrower than typical city standards and where you have multiple units on it. So the HOA is responsible for enforcing it, but the ordinance would give the police chief the ability to enforce it if there's an emergency. And it would be worded such that it's for emergency purposes. In other words, they're not going to be out there, you know, forcing it unless it's a noted issue and the HOA requests them to. But if there is an issue where there's an emergency happening, they can get out there and enforce it.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Anything else, Dan?
Just the number 5 where it was said Xcel's power line easement, is that, if we approve it in here, is there something that's going to make sure it's put with the property? I mean, is it get attached with the abstract deed? How's that, to make sure that it's there so there's no surprises?
Yeah, so this ordinance would be, the PUD ordinance would be recorded on the property. And so, once this gets approved and the final PUD comes forward, that provision stays in there, and we know that they have to address that particular provision.
Thank you.
Doing anything? Ryan, or Mel?
Is there anything presently that's already constructed in the Xcel easement?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
basically, there's one unit right here. And if you drive out there now, you'll see it's been modified.
Hasn't been finished.
Hasn't been finished.
So what happens if Excel doesn't give you what you need for that easement?
Do you want me to?
I just, yeah, whoever wants to answer.
Well, so right now we are in conversation with Excel. We've been proactive with what they've requested. We just halted until we could find an agreement. We've submitted the requested paperwork from them, so we have an application in for their encroachment process, and they've set out some parameters today. We've gone back and forth a couple times, not because we're disagreeing, but because we're trying to find what fits with their parameters and what we can accommodate to know how to best move forward to make that site look the best and perform the best.
So if they don't give you the easement, then what happens?
They put a solution out to raise 4 poles. The cost, we're just reviewing the cost and then looking at other alternatives to that. The worst case is we'd have to pull down the front unit, but that is not, they kind of said we don't have to pull it down, but we've got to modify the structure if we don't raise the poles.
And I'm just making sure that I'm understanding everything. What's the little piece that juts out within the 10-foot setback that the city has shown on there?
Sidewalk.
That'd be your sidewalk.
That's the front sidewalk to the first unit.
So is that gonna stay within the setback?
That's an okay encroachment for the code.
Okay.
So really, you'd be getting that would be for both buildings on left and right, you'd be asking for permission for both at once, correct?
Yeah.
We've already moved back the one on the east side.
They're not parallel yet.
No, they requested we move that building back 5 foot if they raise the power pole, so
Okay.
I did put that in there, so.
Will there be a fence or anything around your home?
Don't plan on it.
Okay.
It'll be a part of the
Curious.
association.
Okay.
So.
So as far as the setbacks, Brad, is that the only thing that's being encroached on, is where the sidewalks are going? And we're not going closer to the property lines to the west or the south?
No, so on the south side, the setback is approximately 20 feet. Or on the west side, the setback is approximately 20 feet, if I remember. On the south side, I think it's like 13, and on the east side, it's the shortest to the property line.
Got it, thank you.
There is enough for somebody to pull out and stop before the trail, so the door can go down behind them before they pull out.
That distance here.
Yeah,
What is
It's under
the distance?
19 feet.
it's about 20 feet, so.
And I'm just being nosy on this. What's the height of the door?
I would assume a 7 or 8 foot high door.
Okay.
Just a standard double car garage door.
The only reason I asked is I just watched someone move into a rebuilt in my neighborhood, and they discovered after they closed that their truck doesn't fit in the garage. So,
That's fun. How many units were in the apartment? On the plat, it shows 33 potentially.
Yeah,
You gotta look hard to see it.
Yeah.
my eyesight is not good.
Thinking of as I work at the school
had to make some revisions in order to get open space down, and so they did shrink the footprint a little bit to do that. But the key thing is gonna be, they can't go much over that, because then they have a parking shortage.
So that's 33 units, but that could be more than 33 parking spots, is that how I'm understanding that?
It is more than 33 parking spots with the surface parking lot.
Just thinking in terms of the times of school, the elementary and the middle school both use that road quite heavily as traffic flows.
So this was reviewed by fire, and there was no concerns about the one-way in, the one-way out?
The only concerns that were expressed to me by fire were making sure that there's a fire hydrant in there, which will be in the civil plans, and then making sure that, and then the thing that was brought up, that was how we got into the discussion about who regulates the no parking on, so we're gonna have them posted for no parking, the driveway, but his concern was, I get that, but who has control to actually enforce that? And the police chief said, we don't enforce it. And we know that that's an issue in other communities, but in other communities that think it's a problem, they actually have modified their codes that make it clear that in these kinds of circumstances, that police has the authority to enforce it.
And I get
We have
that.
to do some research on that still.
Yeah, and it's just yeah, I mean, that'd be nice for us to amend our ordinance to say that, but if it's only for an emergency, if somebody calls 911 because there's a fire in an apartment, we're not gonna have time to go out and say, hey, everybody, move your cars, we're enforcing it now, or have them towed. The big red truck's gonna push them out of the way. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that'll be the enforcement in an emergency.
And I know that Joe had looked at the apartments and the townhomes, and he said they think they can access part of the apartment off of Fifth, and
Yeah.
they just said, part of it on the townhomes, he said it could be
Difficult.
difficult, because they're gonna get in there and they're gonna get bottlenecked.
Right.
If they have to get back out, they're just gonna have to bring another rig each ways. So it's not ideal, but
Doable.
doable according to him, but that's,
Okay. So for today, we're just looking at the preliminary PUD. It'll come back with final and everything else, it's okay.
Yeah, but if we approve it, then we're approving the rezone.
Gotcha, right, the rezoning of the PUD. So, just to extend one more thing, and it probably has nothing to do with it because it's not on this property for this PUD, but addressing the vehicles coming out onto Fifth, crossing the trail, fine, we have signage, people stop, but then, I think as separate from this, or if it's part of this, if it needs to be part of it, is the parking on Fifth, on Fifth Street?
Correct.
Fifth Avenue, I'm sorry. I mean, I look at that as if there's people parked on the road, you got the trail, and if it's school time, there's a lot of crap going on there. I mean, I drive through there every morning, and it's busy, like Brad said, it's just inherently busy, and it's gonna be that way. I would like to see the council or planning and zoning, or whoever would make that recommendation, on Fifth between 16th and the middle school driveway, where you go into the middle school, that there be no parking on either side of the road there, at any time. That way, there's a clear path for the people driving across that to see without people parked. Because sometimes when I drive through in the morning, there's people parked on both sides of the street to drop their kids off, to run across the street to get to school, and you can't see, and then if you're trying to come out across the path, and you've got that and traffic, I think if you just had a clear line of sight, they could concentrate on the trail and not worry about trying to look around cars. So I don't know if that's part of this, or later, or what, but...
later. You were saying something like, Tim, that was something the council can determine, it's not planning and
Yeah, I
zoning.
mean, I think you can direct us and we'll put signage up, and the police are always glad to enforce the parking rules. Right, Josh?
So yeah, that's just something I was looking at when I was looking at the trail crossing, that we should address that at some
We
point.
can do that separate from that.
And you would have to put signs up, not just paint the curb, because
Yep.
we find that doesn't work.
Okay.
I have one last question,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
this is more addressed to the city, I guess. How are we verifying setbacks now? Or are we still not, as construction goes? And not just on this, in general. How are we taking care of that?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I know CMS has been guiding us on that. They have been taking a look at them. They aren't making a determination whether they're basically, they'll tell us if it's too close or not. They won't give us a number because it's not within their purvey to give that number, so we've requested for folks when we tell them to do surveys and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a soft spot in terms of without requesting people to have the survey documents, we don't know exactly if it's on exactly where it should be or not.
Brandon, do we require as-built for new construction?
I don't believe so. And we don't
So this-
require a certificate of survey out of the gate with the
Yeah.
building permit.
So I don't know whether there's a kind of threshold when you do this, but I know a number of cities have the same conversation. How do you actually confirm it in the field? And what a number of cities are doing is requiring as-bills for projects over a certain magnitude where setbacks need to be confirmed. And requiring an as-bill basically puts the pressure on the developer, who knows they gotta give an as-built survey when they're done with the project. And that as-built survey is gonna show whether they're meeting setbacks or not.
But what's the
So they're gonna make special sure in the field that they are.
what's the result in those other cities if it's not, once the as-built survey is done, if they're still encroaching into a setback area, so what?
Well, in most extreme cases, they've had to move or cut off part of the house. In other less extreme cases, they bought land from the neighbor. And in some cases, I highly discourage this, they do an after-the-fact variance. Now, the after-the-fact variance is only good if there's a reason, or there's a valid reason why that variance is needed because of those unique circumstances to the property. Rarely is that really the case. We have a case right now where, I'm working on right now where we have a building height issue. The height of the building, they are gonna give us an as-built, but the height of the building is based on the average finished grade. And when we look at the plan documents that they provided, they were dealing with grading issues because of drainage. They lowered the grade. And they were right up to the 35 height limit. So now all of a sudden they're 5 inches over. Fortunately, the easy solution was to raise the grade back up. But then they had to pay to do some unique drainage improvements to deal with the drainage issue. So there's always a way to get around it, but sometimes it's more egregious than others. The point of an as-built is to say to a developer who's building, or a builder who's building, your steps in the process are to give us a survey, make sure you're on those setbacks, give us then the construction plans, you go build it, and you know at the end of the process you have to give me an as-built. So if I'm building right on that setback line, and I'm the builder, I'm gonna make darn sure that I'm measuring it. So you've got the survey stakes, and you go out and you laser it, and you put a chalk line in, and you say, this is the edge. So it puts the pressure on the builders and developers to do it. It's an added cost to the builders and developers, because they gotta pay for a survey when they're done, and they gotta give that survey back to the city.
Thank you.
But it's just one way to approach it.
Thank you for the explanation.
Was there a survey done on this property before?
We have a survey filed for the original.
So it was done 3 times, and that wasn't caught.
There's no easement on the Schwenke property either for Excel, so it's never been noted.
Yeah, usually the easement shows up, so I'm surprised it didn't show.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
we're shocked too.
Okay, anything else? Wayne, Dan, anything from planning and zoning? You guys kicked it our way.
I think we discussed everything that planning and zoning had.
Okay. Ryan, Mel, anything?
Nothing else.
Okay. All right, we have,
2 items.
2 items. I gotta get the first one here.
That's right, ordinance.
Yep, the ordinance for rezone.
Yep. And then it would be a summary resolution for publication,
Yep.
if it's approved.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion regarding the ordinance approving the rezoning.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, to approve?
To approve, yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And then the summary publication of the...
I'll move to approve the summary publication.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Brad, for your discussion on that. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. On to number 2, Golden Kernel Concept Plan. My understanding this is just a concept plan for information this evening?
Yeah, that's right. As part of our sort of stepped-up planning and zoning process, we have these concept plans being created, which is helpful to us. And in this case, it's very necessary. We had a landowner who had a limited idea of what he wanted, or they wanted to do with the property. And so they requested some help from the city and have contracted with Hoisington to create a concept design for themselves for this property. It's a difficult property. It has a lot of challenges with wetlands, railroad tracks, highways, bisecting things. So included there, you've got the items that the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed. Right now, I think that the idea would potentially be to do some residential. But Brad, if you wanted to chat about that, you sure could.
Picture from last.
Sure, let me just kind of rephrase a little bit what Tim said. So in this particular case, when they came in for the annexation, as Tim mentioned, they kind of gave us a general idea of what they wanted to do. We, subsequently, they came in and said they want to split off the existing farmstead, which is about right here where my hand is showing, and they want to just sell that parcel. When they requested that of us, then as they start to do that, our concern is similar to what we experienced with the Marty discussion earlier, where they start to do things in a piecemeal manner. And so what we said to them is, give us a concept that shows how something can develop in here and lay out. And their response to us was, well, well, what do you mean by a concept? And what we didn't want them to do is go in and draw a detailed lotting pattern for the whole property. We're most concerned about where street connections are gonna be, how park service might happen, and then also to make sure that as they do these piecemeal developments here, we know that at some point in the future, it fits in with a broader development pattern. So we said to them, that's what we're looking for. They came back to us and then said, can the city do it? So we're actually, HKGI is not contracting with them. We basically said, yes, we'll be glad to do it for you if you just pay escrow fee to the city, and we'll put a concept together. And so we did the work. Brandon reviewed it and gave us some comments, and then we've taken it through the normal concept process. So they basically paid the city escrow fund to cover our fees for this work. What we looked at here, and I guess this is important to understand also, the city's Vail property is right in here. The project that we're looking at with potential development for some higher density housing projects here and bringing a street in, but we're not looking at extending that street, and that's a point of discussion we need to have. And then the long-term idea for improvements to this park. This piece right here in the corner is split away from the rest of this property by Maston Creek, and so it's got incredible access issues. Of course, you're not going to have access on the Highway 14, and so our early conversations with them were, they were saying, you know, would the city be willing to buy this? And I don't know that the city's in a position to buy that from them, but they could consider that as part of park dedication when and if they develop this property. You've also got the railroad tracks that come in through here, and then you've got a county road here, so we had to make sure that we thought about access for local streets and spacing. So the concept that we have here, maybe it's not in here, maybe I have to pull it up.
Brad, if you go into Dropbox, it's the items in there.
Okay, let me pull it up here differently. Do you guys have a copy of that?
Yeah, it's in Dropbox. The council can see it. It's at the top of their, it's at the top of their Dropbox, so.
Okay, bear with me 1 second here and I'll pull it up.
Just moved it while we were looking at it.
Dropbox.
Because I was like, where'd it go?
Oh,
there it is. Linda stole it.
Oh, I moved it.
Yeah. Because we had questions.
You're able to look at the concept while I pull it up here. For some reason, I can't seem to find it here.
Yeah, that's fine. I can talk about it a little bit, you know, and you can see there's two items there at the bottom. There's two maps kind of added into that attachment that were from P&Z after they reviewed it on Monday. So you've got the future land use for the city of Casson, which, you know, you can see where the guidance was on that, and then you can see kind of the in and out maps of this property itself. As I said, the property that's south of the railroad tracks has some unique challenges with access, just because the best access is probably through Vail property, but you have some wetland problems there, and, you know, you have railroad crossings, which will be difficult. You know, obviously, working with railroads, we know that they can be fine to work with, but nothing's free, and it can be difficult to continue with those crossings. There's two potential crossings that Brad's added into the development here. One that's already a farm crossing, and the other one would be potentially that one on the east side that'd be coming through. Basically, what the feedback is that you've got medium-density residential, which immediately abuts the city, kind of behind, across the street from Mr. Bigelow's current development, and we have a couple planning and zoning members who live right next to this, so it's interesting to get their feedback. And then you've got a little bit lighter density, and basically what Brad has indicated to me is that they've kind of told the folks from Golden Corral that they feel like the larger lots, there'd probably be deeper lots along the railroad tracks, just because you'd have a little bit better screening, and then also some deeper lots along 34, and the lots in the interior would probably be more like our normal size city lots, which is, you know, just over a fifth of an acre, or, you know, quarter of an acre. So those are kind of the highlights of it. And as I said, concept design, just an idea of what could happen out here. There are some other potential uses. I've had some folks talk to me, some different developers who are working with the owner of this property to look at what the park could mean, or if there's some park amenities that they would add in, maybe a larger development there alongside of Lions Park, our expansion there. So I guess those are kind of the highlights. Are there any questions anybody has on that?
did have it reviewed by the county, and Brandon provided some look at the water side of it, and those, I think stormwater is a relatively easy design configuration. The county was supportive of the access to the local streets.
I think it looks good as a preliminary concept. I mean, do they have any idea of when they want to proceed with planning? I mean, is this a long-term vision someday?
I think it's more of a long-term vision, Brad. I don't think you have any other information on that timeframe.
What I can tell you is that it's long-term. However, the moment we say that, they're gonna find a buyer and come in tomorrow. So I think the market is really strong out there for development. And I know you're obviously seeing it. They wanna start with splitting off that farmstead because they have a renter in there and they wanna sell it to the renter. And, I don't know that they're actively marketing it, but I know that they've got a realtor team that's talking about different ideas and concepts. It's a difficult site because it's sandwiched between the railroad tracks and the county road.
That's tough.
It's long and linear. So that poses challenges, but as far as I know, it's long term.
Okay. No, to me it looks good as an initial concept, and we'll see what happens after that.
If we are faced with this down the road, I'm just not in favor of going around
Two properties like
that. You know, we've just had an argument earlier tonight about squaring off boundaries, and we've had issues in the past about how we service these areas and personal homes that aren't in the city. 10 or 12 years ago, we had an issue across from the fairgrounds. So I think the more that we can encourage them, or encourage the property owner to consider coming into the city as part of this whole thing, is the right way of doing it.
They are fully annexed. And one thing about the next step for them would be, if they're gonna split off that farmstead site, they have to come to the city to ask for subdivision to split that one parcel off. And so to your point, Dwayne, I think that's a good point, that when we allow that, we put conditions in there that say, when sewer and water and infrastructure gets extended out to that area, that they connect into that. And there may be a discussion about changing their access from Highway 34 to the local streets, which is why we did the exercise we did, was to make sure that the rest of that property plats out, they're gonna connect to it.
Because this whole section's already been annexed in, correct?
Well, the only portion that's not is the western farmstead. That was not owned, that was not owned by the Brun folks.
Okay.
But the eastern one is on the parcel, so they are already city residents.
Yeah.
We had to let them know they had to vote in the city Casson this time around, instead of the township. But I think that what Brad said about changing their access and reorientating, I mean, potentially this could be a larger lot in a subdivision, but we would probably have them coming off of a city street instead of the access off of 34.
Makes sense.
So,
Good.
This one was the one that Tim was mentioning that's not in the city limits.
Okay.
But this one is, and when they subdivide, they'll be in it, and we'll just need to make sure when they subdivide that parcel off, there's conditions in there that get recorded on the property. They essentially say when city services come out, they need to hook up in some respect.
I mean, one thing to do would be with that western parcel is to let them know that when city sewer and water extended, I mean, it's a perfect opportunity for them.
It's a good opportunity.
For them, time-wise,
Makes
if
sense.
they're doing septic or having issues with their septic, it'd be a time to be able to turn over, and it would make sense cost-effective-wise. So we would try to do a positive encouragement for them to come in as opposed to, any kind of forcing or anything like that, so.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Brad, appreciate the input.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'm gonna bail. I don't think there's anything else you need me for, right?
Nope, thanks very much,
That's it.
Brad.
Yep, have a great night, Brad, thank you.
Thanks,
All
Brad.
right, thanks, guys.
Yep,
Bye.
bye. Okay, on to number 3.
All right, and this was an ad tonight, Mr. Mayor, appreciate it. We had a EMS meeting, would have been last week, and I wasn't able to attend, I was out of town for a conference, but we were ably represented by our commissioners, who has a lot of good questions from what I was told, and had a good conversation with the fire chief about it, as well as with some of the folks from ICS. So there are a couple of these big handouts if somebody wants to see it on paper. Now, this is a a preliminary, this was the one that they reviewed at EMS, there were a few tweaks to it, not a lot of tweaks, but there were some tweaks, but I know for some folks, it's easier to just see it in paper, so if you want to look at that, otherwise, you do have the updated version included in Dropbox there, and we do have a representative tonight who's here. I think, where we're at right now is, some feedback from the EMS committee members to see kind of where you're at with it, the design-wise. The goal was from council, the directive was to get close to a design, that we wanted to try and start finalize that. And then there are some questions about the next couple of steps in the process, how that would work. I know there was some discussion about ballot questions and things like that. And I encourage the council to have that conversation starting tonight, because if we do decide to move in that direction, I'll need some guidance from you on what a ballot question would look like, what it would say, and how we would, I need to bring that to the county at a certain point in time when they print their ballots. So, basically, with that, I would say, if Mel, if you want to talk about it, you're the chair of the committee, and if you've got some initial feedback, Ryan, this is a great time to have that conversation, so.
I think we were all really pleased to have the packet presented to us. We were thrilled to hear how the architects and ICS are working with the fire department to try to really solve some peculiarities to the design of fire stations, such as traffic flow and decontamination and other issues. There were a few things that sounded like you guys were still discussing with Joe on how to meet their very specific needs. Those were the primary things. I think we were both pretty thrilled. The committee was pretty thrilled to see that it is being designed with an eye towards potential future expansion down the road to include, in the fullness of time when needed, a police station and the other city offices that could be added on later. Ryan, anything I'm missing?
Go to page 3 if you can. It's got a little bit of a breakdown on the far right of the fire station with the precast building, and then precast and metal. And you can see that the precast with metal came in a lot cheaper. So, I believe that's page 3.
Page 2.
Oh, 2, sorry, on the spreadsheet, it's, okay, yeah, here we go. So if you look, there's 2 different price points. The precast with the metal would be around where the trucks are located, and the precast is all the rest of the building. And then, if you go to 10, I'm gonna look at the packet.
Sure.
10, it's got 2 different floor plans for where the decontamination units are, lockers.
10.1.
10.1. I believe the left-hand side was the left diagram was the one that was preferred because of the walk-through between the laundry and the decontamination in the equipment area.
Well, and there were two means by which they could get, or three means by which they could get from the building to the various parts of the equipment bay.
Yeah, so coming from the yellow into the rest of the building there. We did talk with Joe about the possibility of putting their current fitness equipment on the second floor, because there is a second floor where they're storing items and electrical, correct?
Yes, so, I guess, when we're looking at, I think probably best if you look at page 11. You'll see the highlighted blue area there. That's within the apparatus bay, which is where all the trucks are. I think that's where Joe is intending to maybe put some fitness equipment, and up on that. It's basically an open platform built within the apparatus bay.
One of the concerns from committee members on the EMS committee was the long-term health and wellness of the fire department and eventually police department, if that does come about. And having that fitness area was something that they were very concerned about not having. They wanted to see something there. Joe said he had numbers to share with us eventually on how often it's currently used. So we're looking to see those numbers to see if that's something that does support the need for that.
So basically adding existing equipment that they have into this area for use as a fitness area by the firefighters, which makes it sort of a zero cost.
And you guys can correct me if I'm out of line, and maybe Joe told you something that I'm not privy to, but I don't know that that whole entire mezzanine level is to be dedicated to.
No.
No, just
So
part of it, no,
yeah,
no.
So there's gonna be a storage
Yeah,
component to
yeah.
that mezzanine as well.
Right.
So what's the second story for?
Okay, so,
What do we need a second story for?
so page 11, again, if we're left or west of that blue highlighted area, I mean, that's really the precast portion of the building, that's kind of that office community space. When you look at the crosshatched area, that's labeled as mechanical, electrical, and generator, right? So that's all within the storm shelter component of the building. And so, and there's also storm shelter component on the first level as well. But to meet the requirements of the storm shelter, all the mechanical has to be contained within that storm shelter area to ensure that it's protected in the event of an event.
On the second floor?
Yes. So that's where we've located it for this plan.
That's the second floor, and if you go back to page 10, plain page 10, it's the green crosshatched area.
Right, yep.
So it's the second story to that. So the kitchen, training, toilet area that's there is also in the storm shelter area. And then the second floor is what's containing the mechanical equipment necessary to run the storm shelter.
And the mezzanine storage is for what storage? Because we're adding a whole bunch of storage on the first floor as far as all the equipment storage and tanks and tools, and what are we storing on the second floor?
But I think that there is stuff that they use not regularly, more so like once a year, is kind of what I've been told. So stuff that they don't need regular access to. I believe kind of the stuff on the storage in the first floor is their regular use.
Right. That was my understanding as well.
Yep.
We probably could get some more specifics on that, though, because, I mean, I think the point that we want to have a second floor access makes a lot of sense. How much space up on the second floor is actually built at this time would be something that I'd like, because I don't know what they're planning on storing up there either. Joe hasn't told me that, so I think that it would allow you to have potential future development just by having that access built for the storm shelter component and the corridor. You know, whether that mezzanine, that might be an area that we do see some cost savings, I don't know, but I mean, it'd be interesting to see what he has to say for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm just because we know the space they have now, and everything fits. We're getting a lot more storage on the main floor here than what they even have today. What would have to go on a second floor mezzanine? That's all I'm curious about, what's gonna be stored up there.
Well, I can touch base with Joe and see what his inventory would look like for that second storage. I mean, it is a large space, 2,000 square foot of additional space.
That completely covers their lockers, their equipment, storage, it covers their laundry, it covers the decontamination area and the equipment area, correct?
That's right, we right, built on top of that area.
Part of it to cover as well.
And that's a possibility, yeah. I guess that's a good question. So those different spaces that Ryan just brings up, the locker room area, the equipment storage, laundry, that kind of thing, I mean, would that be required to have a ceiling or not? Could that be open to the
We're talking all of the spaces within the apparatus bay, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The people part as opposed to the truck part.
Right.
That overlaps.
Yeah, so if we're looking at equipment storage, decontamination, and laundry, I do believe that can be open space, to the general apparatus.
So at some point in the future, they could build a ceiling to build that second floor on top of it if it's all concrete?
I would think that you could completely enclose that.
Okay. Well, because I think that's kind of what, to the mayor's point, he's wondering what the additional space is, so.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering if that could just be ceiling and roof for the whole thing and put some over it without the mezzanine.
Sure.
I would say that you could probably finish that space out on that mezzanine level, but it wouldn't be able to be, I guess, defined as storm shelter.
Sure. Well, the mezzanine's not storm shelter now, is it? Right, I mean, the storm shelter would still...
Just the square portion is storm shelter.
Right, the storm shelter would still have the stairs up to the mechanical and storm shelter.
Yeah, so we're just talking about the part in blue on
Just
page
the part in
11.
blue.
Yep.
If you look on 14, on the renderings for kind of the three-dimensional, The back side of the building, that's where the talk of, if there ever is an addition, those parts of the roof are flat, so that second floor, if it ever does transpire, go there. In page 14, picture on the top right. And then the police station in that empty space. And where the ambulance bay is currently. But that's all future, long-term.
Sure.
You buy one Lego set, you build it, and then you hope you can add on later when it goes on sale.
But Chris, I think the idea behind that mezzanine is just kind of capturing additional space that's already there and turning it into currently usable space, as opposed to wasting space.
Sure, no, I get that.
Sort of like my hatred of double-stacked entryways in modern houses, because it's a complete waste of space.
But if you could add it down the road when there's more money feasible.
You know, I get that, it would be
we don't need the
interesting to know
space,
what
that's
the savings is, if it's a substantial savings, as opposed to,
No, I think that's a good question too, is the cost benefit. I mean, right, if you're gonna save $1 million, then, okay, maybe we wait, but if it's a much smaller savings, then maybe it doesn't make as much sense. Maybe it makes sense to finish it now, I don't know.
Would you have to look at a redesign of page 10.1? Because the stairs are currently located, go up to the mezzanine. If you took out that space, you'd have to move those stairs to an entrance, correct? The storm room on the second floor?
no, that red part stays.
Yeah, I think we're talking just about the blue part, Ryan.
Okay, yeah.
The orange, I think that storm shelter section would
Okay.
probably stay no matter what. That would be, it would,
Yeah.
so you were right,
I
in
get
terms
what
of
you're
your
saying.
your rendering would just stay the same. It wouldn't look any different from the outside.
I see
It
the
would just
second.
be what's finished up on the second
I
floor.
didn't see the second set of stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
But for some reason, I was thinking there was a training component. I know that front stairway doubles as a training,
The
Tower type.
The red, yeah.
stair on the south doubles as a training component.
but I didn't know if the mezzanine area
There was a training component.
was not, okay.
It's a good question.
Yeah, just,
I think,
It's a valid question.
I think this mezzanine somewhat replicates what they have on, I want to say it's the east end of the
Oh,
existing.
you have that
fire
kind of
system.
mezzanine right now, sure.
So I think that's kind of where this came about, is maybe a lot of the stuff that's currently stored over there would make its way to this building.
And one thing I was kindly reminded that the numbers, the prices on page number 2 do not include additional fees, designs, all those different things that we don't always see
Right.
in the building process. The wording of, we talked about the wording of a question and a ballot. That was something Joe brought up and was concerned about and wondering about. That was something we were gonna talk about today, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in favor of, we asked for a design, future use, this type of thing, when we first originally did it, was what could we design and when could we build it, when would it fit with our way of paying for it? And if it's gonna move up to soon, I think it's a big enough project where, I know the people that elect us, but I think that's a big enough project when we go over $3 or $4 million for something like this, that the people should have a choice to say yes or no. And I firmly believe if it's a good project, they'll vote yes for it. So, and that's the part about, I think, whittling it down to where we're building only what we have to have, with the eye toward the future for expansion. So that, yeah, no, definitely, the ballot question would be something we'd have to research and see, because there's certain requirements you have to have in it, and
Well, so this is I would say it's an advisory ballot question. It's something the council would be choosing to do, which may be out of abundance of caution, bringing to the voters. It's not a referendum. We're not looking at utilizing that format currently, at least for funding for this. About half of the funding we're anticipating being buttressed by our natural gas franchise fee, which the council approved, which is a good thing, because it definitely makes the yearly ask a little bit smaller. But yeah, we'd want to fine tune the language, and working with Nancy, we would have to figure out what our ask would actually be financially, based off of debt service, what's coming on, what's going on. and some of it's relative to the projects that you as a council select. You'd say, well, we're gonna prioritize a street project, or we're gonna prioritize this. And those are things you guys weigh out and make a choice about, which is your job, so.
I'm looking at precast versus precast metal. There's line items of special construction in the precast building. Precast metal building, it's
Dan,
actually...
which page are you on?
Page 2.
Okay.
Where the pricing is. Under special construction, it's saying another almost $600,000 for special construction.
That's really the pre-engineered metal building component. So that's the apparatus bay metal building piece.
So why would that cost $600,000 where there's no cost at all of those precasts?
Because on the left precast side, the entire building is precast, right? You don't have the metal building component.
Oh, it's part of the building structure.
Right.
Okay.
Look up a couple lines, Dan, you see where the building structure,
Cost savings.
2.3 million, then 1.1 on the other.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your
Yeah.
difference.
It just was weird to where it listed special construction instead of it should have just, I think it should just be under construction of the building. But I mean, so it just almost like somebody's adding something, is what it looks like.
Yeah,
It's deceiving when you read it.
for sure.
And I just didn't want anything sneaking in and all of a sudden we're going, oh, there's $600,000, what's that?
Yep, so that is kind of the dedicated piece of that metal building component, or portion of the building. And I think someone made a point with the building structure, that's where you've got a bigger delta between the 2.3 and the 1.1.
Asking it as an advisory question, is that the right term to use?
That's what I would call it, yep.
And it doesn't lock us into doing anything still, it just kind of gives us a feel for what our constituents in the community think about the project, but it doesn't lock us into anything.
Yeah, and I think it stems from the fact that we've discussed before, like, a lot of times we have some difficulties in getting feedback what we'd like. An EMS committee certainly has tried to open houses, contacting people, doing meetings. Our EMS meeting is a public meeting, and until people actually have an opportunity to see what the effect would be on them. It's the same thing with Highway 57, talked about it for 4 years. You were in the council before I was here, and how much feedback, sometimes you get a lot of feedback, a lot of times you don't, until all of a sudden people go, oh, you're doing that. We talked about it a year ago and nobody said anything, right?
Now it's gonna cost me.
Yeah,
That's where-
or it's gonna impact my life somehow. So I think, that's kind of what you are, is you are getting a good read of the electorate, which, that's the reason that we put, that's the state government puts it on constitutional amendments out there. Because a lot of times they could vote on those things themselves, but they say, hey, this is a big enough deal that we want the voters to have a chance to. And it gives you some flexibility too.
If we put an advisory question on the ballot, I think once the plans get kind of finalized and we get the cost down and the impact, you'll have a lot more people attending informational meetings, because it's real. It's not just, hey, we're thinking about this sometime in the future. Well, a lot of people aren't interested in attending that.
Just to clarify something, the storage mezzanine was part of the original design, and then the idea of a fitness center was brought up at the meeting. I think, Josh, you might have been the one that brought it up. And as a potential compromise, I suggested, could you carve out space in that storage area, use that as a place to put your fitness equipment now, and then down the line, if we need something bigger, when we're expanding, when we're adding a police station, then you look at a separate area designed for that use.
I have no problem with the fitness equipment they bought.
No, I just
and all
wanted
that kind
to
of stuff. Yeah, no.
explain how that
I just think if we're
concept
gonna
came in.
design and build a fitness area for city employees, it should be available to all city employees.
But
And if
we're
it's
not.
for the- Right, but if
This was
it's,
just using existing equipment that they already had and providing a space, or using space that was already designed as a place where that equipment could go.
right, and that's why I asked the question of,
Okay.
if we don't need the mezzanine, because we added all this other storage on the main floor, we're adding a lot of storage space that they don't have now. And we're Americans, so the more storage space you build, the more crap you put in it, right? So, that's a technical term, I guess. So if we don't need the storage space, we don't need that mezzanine. That's just my thing. And if we're gonna have a dedicated fitness thing for a certain department, then that department should have annual physicals to maintain their status in that department. So if we're gonna invest in fitness equipment or an area or whatever it is as a city, then there should be an end to that, right? We want our people to be healthy, number one, great. But if it's actually for a department that we rely on their physical skills to be able to do their job and to help people, then we should have some requirements attached to that if we're gonna, as a city, spend money on it. That's just my opinion.
Just trying to clarify.
No, and I got the whole thing there that it's not a dedicated spot for the fitness, but I'm
Right.
just questioning if we don't need that storage space and it's a cost savings.
Sure.
I'm all for looking at that. Again, where it's located, where it's at, might not be, so.
And I do agree with you, if you're gonna have a fitness area in one department, it needs to be shared across all departments, if they so deem to use it.
Right. If we're gonna build the space for it. If
If we're
they're just
building
using
space.
some storage space for it, that's a different story, so.
Maybe I missed this, I apologize. So on page 2, you've got the precast, the metal precast. Which of those two does the project on the left-hand side correlate to in terms of cost?
Wow.
Say that one more time.
So you've got 6.5 million precast.
Yep.
We've got 5.56 million precast metal. Which one does that correlate to on the left-hand side in the spreadsheet there?
The overall budget summary.
Yeah.
So I think the overall budget summary was preliminary budgeting to basically chunk out where we think these costs are gonna land.
Sure.
I think when we initially started planning with you guys, the thought was is the entire building would be precast. That was, I think, a desire by the city and I think the fire department, just to, make sure that the building, has a certain look to it. And so that's what was budgeted.
No, and that's fine. I was just wondering, so if we were gonna say this overall project summary on the left-hand side, if we were doing that, if the council chose to do precast metal, we'd see a revision on that budget probably down, to correlate with the $1 million difference in terms of precast versus metal precast. I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I'm just wondering, for my own need, like, okay, if we're at $7 million, which one is that, precast or the precast metal?
Because I'd like to see the difference, like you say, 'cause
Yeah.
$1 million is a lot of money, and if you're doing it, and then all of a sudden we approve it, and then you're like, your overall comes in at 6.9.
Yep.
And maybe you can get back to me if you're not sure about that. That's
I
fine.
would just say, the overall budget summary, preliminary, high level, with this schematic design estimate, we're really taking off the plans that you're seeing today,
Sure.
factoring in some market volatility and everything that you're seeing with pricing. We're still trying to deliver, a quality building within the budget that you guys, have kind of communicated to us on the front end. And we just continue to do cost estimates as we work through both this design, that's why we kind of do a comparison, just so you can see where the numbers are falling, as we're reaching out to different suppliers for these different components, make sure we're getting accurate pricing.
Okay. Well, if you can get back to me on which one it is, then that's fine. Just email me, that's no problem.
Well, I'll say that the overall budget summary was based on a precast building.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So,
Let me interject a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the 6.5 is the total project cost with the precast as it stands today, correct?
Yes.
So it is total project cost, so you are comparing apples to apples. You guys went in at 6.8.
Well,
As they refine this, they're at about 6.5, and
Yeah,
they're
we're
providing
to those two.
an alternative at about 5.5 with the metal.
With the metal
precast.
reduction.
So
Okay.
you are kind of comparing, it was starting at the budget number out of the gate, and then now this is kind of revised budget number. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think, I don't know that I'm almost certain that the schematic design estimate on the right-hand side does not include, design consulting fees.
Sure, no, I understand that part of it. I just wanted to, so I'm looking at the construction cost mostly, and then, your line items break out. You've got your furnishings and stuff like that, so that's comparable to furnishings and things like that on the left-hand side. No, I think I understand. It seems like the precast is what we've got on the left-hand side. So, anyway, okay, that was really what I needed.
Just looking at this, on the bottom line of the green item there, you do have site, general conditions and fees at $460,000. Is that?
So that's, when you have subcontracts underneath, like a general those aren't built into each of our line items, right? And so we figure that, as we start issuing contracts to these people, they'll have their 10% or whatever fee, that we typically don't see on their bid, they have it built into their bid number.
It's not apples to apples, at your point, Tim.
Okay.
Fair enough. And actually, Brandon, I was gonna, I know when you and I talked about it just briefly the other day, you had a few feedback items. If you have time, I would love it if you could look through some of this information and give me some of your feedback as well.
Yeah, all minor stuff. I think the council's got a lot bigger conversations. We start working out the finer details of the site plan.
Sure.
Things we'll work through. I'm not worried about that. We'll get through it.
Okay. Anything else? We got kind of sidetracked on different things. Anything else from the committee?
No, not that I can think of.
Any strong feelings as far as, I mean, just obvious, and the precast with the metal building on the side is gonna be $1 million difference.
Yep.
I think that wasn't an issue, that was
Yeah, I
fine.
mean, just thinking ahead, if, you know, the more streamlined and frugal we can be, the better chance that we get better feedback.
Agree.
I think we've made that message pretty clear, and we talked quite a bit about that, and also how the voters are gonna worry about when it comes time for the costs, and how
Right.
much it costs them.
Yeah.
We did stress that quite a bit.
And I think our other two civilian members made that abundantly clear.
Okay.
Tim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, like, the timeline that was, I guess, our approach, and I don't know if this factors into anything that you guys have going on, but it would be to, you know, progress the design to construction documents that could go out for bid. It could be out for bid before the next election cycle. You could see what the bids come in at, and I don't know if that would be helpful information to have as you put it on as a question.
We put it out to bid, though, and the people overwhelmingly say no,
Yeah.
then we already put it out to bid, don't we have to take the bid?
No, you don't. You can reject all bids,
Okay.
as any project we have. I mean, obviously, I think if it was a high percentage if it was projected at all, I think it would be.
Would that set a bad precedence to do that, to take bids and then say we're canceling it all? Is that common?
You have to fine tune your bidding schedule, because if you're bidding it and then doing an election, and you know, the timeline to approve those bids is gonna get a little hairy.
Right, I think it would make more sense to, I mean, that's something
Get on that.
we can fine tune that, I think. If the council decides that they wanna move forward with a ballot question, then we would take that into account with any timeline we would generate for bidding or whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's,
There was
it's
something...
almost like we're gonna do it anyway.
It
We're
looks,
already started, we put the bid out, we're gonna do it anyway. And I wanna avoid that.
bad.
It's an advisory question,
Mhm.
but if the people say no, then we gotta go back to the drawing board of what they'll do.
Right.
We can't say, oh, you said no, but we're just gonna do it anyway. I can't.
That ain't
I can't-
gonna be good.
I can't endorse that at all.
Right.
It's just bad.
No, I think that makes, like I said, I think once the council makes that decision to move to a ballot question, we would use that as our guideline in terms of timelines, how we would generate that timeline. So, I mean, I think that would, I don't know, I mean, it's up to what the council wants to do in terms of their timeline too. Let me see here, I think I do have a sheet here. So, yeah, I think...
The goal of getting to that next level of design to have something to show at like Festival in the Park, the street
Mhm.
dance,
Mhm.
was that part of our goal, was to have something more to show people, they can ask questions?
Yeah, absolutely, it was to have a package like this that is something where, like, I think the mayor mentioned, it's a real thing,
Yeah.
instead of being kind of that theoretical, we might do this, or...
Close to that.
I think this was included in the EMS packet last week. It was two options for schedule.
That's what I'm...
Sure, and I
Scribbling
recalled
behind.
that, and, one of them is a little bit more aggressive than the other. So I think we'd probably be looking at the little bit less aggressive option, which would be where they, would look at bidding after a ballot question.
Yeah.
If it was approved, or if the council chose to move forward at that time, then that would be when our timeline would be.
Could you refresh my recollection what the timeline was, the less aggressive one?
Sure, I think that they've got, let's see here, it looks like August 29th is a submittal of design documents. So, and I know we talked about having those preliminary design documents for Festival in the Park for the street dance. So I think within that 2-week period would be fine. Then they would like to, says all work scopes bid, late November.
After the election?
After the election, I mean, would be what, in my own mind, would think of. Construction start date, what they've got is September of '23, and then some substantial completion would be late summer of '24. And that's based on 8 to 10 month lead times for precast metal components.
And that kind of puts us back where we started.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it avoids the construction project we'll talk about later, that gets pushed to the 23, so, at the same intersection.
When you're talking cost savings, do you have a list of what kind of furnishings that are going in there, what grade of flooring, grade of countertops?
So that more comes in the next phase of design. In design development, we'll start looking at the different finishes, different levels of finishes, exterior finishes.
But you've picked a number here, so, I mean, if you've picked a number for here, you've got an idea of what you're looking at. So you already have an idea of what you're thinking of. Are we top of the line, middle line, bottom line? Because, I mean, you could, right now, if your number is saying top of the line, we could be dropping it immediately before it went out, because you wouldn't need top of the line in a fire hall, no offense. You want it versatile, so...
We, when we're plugging in, like, we know what areas would get carpet, what areas would get sealed concrete, what areas would get, like a luxury vinyl tile, something like that. We use pretty much average, middle-of-the-road numbers in our estimates. That's about what I know as far as the level of finishes that we're talking. We figured for, some exterior finishes just, so that we can earmark that, okay, we did figure for this on the exterior, it could be pulled out if we were looking at saving some money, but...
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Do we need anything?
No, I think we just need to keep going.
Okay.
Get the pulse as it is, and make a decision from there.
Okay.
We could spend hours
Right.
nickel and dime on this.
Right now is not the time to do that. Question is, do we want to move forward with the next phase and then get that so we have the information in August so that people have a chance to voice their opinion? And then the design, or which way? I mean, I'll go with the cheaper way.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really much difference in the aesthetics or
No, and I think
function or whatever.
that was kind of what we all agreed as well.
Okay.
So guidance on that, so absolutely, I'll be having some conversations with you all about that as we move forward this month. The second half of that is the comfortability with this formulation of a ballot question. What I would want is direction from you if that is where the council wants to go, so that I can kind of start that process and start talking to colleagues and also figuring out exactly, bring you options for language of what we would feel appropriate. So that'd be what I would also be asking for is if you're you don't have to make a decision tonight, but if you are comfortable directing me and staff to start that process, I would appreciate it.
It'd be interesting to get some samples of other, because we're not the first person to ever do this, or the first city. And then, my only feedback on that is, it needs to be clear and concise and easy to understand. Because we've had some issues with some ballot questions, 15, 20, whatever it was years ago, where there was some, and it's a one question, one answer. Yes or no, not a if, then, or, do this part, but if you say yes to that or no to that, would you do it? It's clear, concise, simple, easy, yes or no. No BS.
And also, as far as the mezzanine, what are they using up there for storage?
So that'll be the second thing I'll be checking on between now and our next meeting, would be get a good idea of what that space is needed for.
To make sure, because, I mean, like,
well, that part,
we have a lot of
but then
storage.
also from a design standpoint, if we eliminated that blue part, the storm shelter part's gotta be there with the staircase and all that going on, but if you somehow eliminated the finishing of that or whatever it is, what is the cost savings?
Sure. Because even if you didn't put a mezzanine, you needed a roof, you could put up a easy ceiling versus a mezzanine, so I mean, there's...
Unless there's something particular about the decontamination area that needs to be...
Ventilation or something, yep.
And that is something I'm wondering.
So, look into that.
Okay, so is the council's comfortable with me generating some ballot question options for you?
Yep.
To review? Okay, well then I will move forward with that, and then some of these other items we'll work on as well, okay?
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody, appreciate it. Thank you. Anything else you've got for us at all, or?
Nope.
You good? All right. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
On to G, number one, the food truck permit or mobile business permit.
Sure, at our last meeting, we had some conversation with some folks who had questions about it. It's a work in progress, obviously, but I believe Linda's got some good information in there for you. She's kind of been heading this up, so Linda, if you want to just discuss that.
Sure. On the request for council action sheet, there's some cities that I had went out and solicited some, numbers for. And then Dwayne had given me, he had sent me this formula in the middle of the page. And so when I put that formula in, it comes up to about 99.30. And it's like that, I think we could justify $100 as an annual permit for a mobile business, leave the food truck for an annual permit at $250, and then a 6-month, and it'd have to be consecutive 6 months for a 6-month license or permit at $150. And then just get rid of the $25 for a 1 to 3 day permit.
Okay. Thanks, Linda, for putting all that together. Appreciate it.
Sure, and so the fee schedule is there with the changes on it, and then the mobile business policy is also attached. So I would just need a motion, and it can be one motion to approve or deny either, or both.
Okay. Any questions for Linda or Tim on that?
Can I get a clarification on the 6-month license one? You said it had to be back-to-back. Can you explain that?
I'm sorry, 6 consecutive months?
Oh, 6, they can't do 3 on, 3 off. It's gotta be
Right.
So like the ice cream truck isn't gonna be open in December?
Right.
Yeah.
So like
no.
the ice cream truck would be
Yep.
from May to September.
Yeah, I may have had a conversation with someone that maybe has one of those and was wondering about that. Okay.
Got it. Any other questions, comments?
Is there a way to remind these businesses that maybe they come here, but they're also housed here, that parking their trailers on city streets is not permitted overnight?
Well, they would get that with the whole policy and the permit.
Okay.
They
I mean, when they park
get
in
the
front
whole
of their
package.
residential home, reminding them that that's not where you're allowed to park your business.
Well, that's a good question. I think we would, I guess, Josh, we would allow that. Is it any different from a regular trailer? They have 24 hours, or what would be the rule there, Josh? Because I know on 7th Street, we've got somebody who's parking it every single day.
Yeah, and that's, trailers are 24 hours.
Yeah.
So they'd be able to keep it there as long as it moves during that 24-hour period. So they could park it there every night.
Because you do have the one on 16th Street in front of those townhomes that's been there for 3 weeks. They're building, but it's not on the property, it's in the street, which is...
Not to open a can of worms, sorry.
No, but it's...
No, but that's more than just that
Were you
area.
talking more about the one on 16th Street, or?
Every street you look on it's become an issue again. It's
The one on 7th Street is the one I see every day, because that's the one I drive past, and it is a large trailer, but typically it does move every day. So that's why I haven't brought it up to them already, because otherwise I would say, absolutely, this is a problematic situation. And we want to make sure that everything's uniform and the same. So if somebody's got an ice house, it's the same there, or if it's a business, I don't want no special treatment for anybody. I think that's the way it needs to be.
Good point. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay.
I brought forward the formula because of the argument that was brought before us last time, so to me, it seemed to make sense.
Yeah, no, that was my point with going back and looking at it was, what do we have into it? Because we're just trying to recoup our costs, we're not trying to, it's not a profit center for the city or anything, so. Any other questions, comments?
So the food vendor, you're saying 250, is there more time involved to do that permit versus, if you're changing the 1 to 100 for non-food, is there a price, is there more work to it?
There's a different safety level.
But I just require,
There's probably not much more work to it, because it's a license, and they're gonna have to give us a copy of the license, but like Dwayne said, it's more of the safety level. If somebody gets food poisoning from one of the trucks and comes back at us, it's gonna be more than a bad haircut.
And it's gonna
Well, and I
be
just asked
more
because
than an hour of
that
time
question's gonna
tracing
come
it
to
down.
us immediately if we approve this, because they're gonna say, why did you change, they're gonna say, so that's why,
Liability.
so I want to clarify it, that's all.
Because as Linda pointed out, and Dwayne pointed out, it's gonna take more time to chase down which food truck.
Oh,
In
sure.
the event that there's a foodborne illness.
I'm just looking at, that question's coming immediately.
No, I think that's a good question.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carry.
And that's approving both?
Yes.
Perfect.
On to the liquor ordinance update, number 2.
Sure. This is also an old business item that we discussed at a previous meeting. You can see the research from the deputy clerk. She took a look at a number of different communities, generally in our area, and it varies greatly on what the language in their code sort of says. And she's got sort of a recommendation, and that would be, there's really 2 options. One would be to change the distance, which is certainly viable within that range of different distances we see with cities. And the other one would be to change the language for school from school to public school, which would also, at least in this case, rectify that issue. And it's very clear in certain communities that's kind of what our intention was.
What is the distance between the school and the proposed brewery?
It is 306, I believe. Yeah, 306, and that's from the building to building, which is how our code reads.
So at this point, everything would be fine, so long as someone doesn't open a church.
Closer to the building, you mean? Yes.
And I only say that in view of all of the joy that Rochester is going through with the Castle Community Building,
Sure.
where
There are
churches
definite
come,
issues
churches
and-
go.
Yeah, definite issues there.
It's easier to change it to public schools.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? Appreciate the work.
I noticed that they didn't ask any Wisconsin cities.
Yeah, there was no Wisconsin.
They may be right next to each other in Wisconsin, I don't know. I mean,
They might be in
the
the same
church, the
building.
bar, and the school.
They might put the brewery in the school.
It's a training course.
Attached to the church, yeah. Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, thanks for getting that clarified.
So what would you like to have the ordinance change then? The distance or the school?
I would say the same, to call it
Public school?
public school, yeah. Do you need a,
That's the intention. Yep, we'll need a motion on that.
I'd make a motion that we change that to say public school over.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? No? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 3, electric rules.
Sure. This is an old business item, was also brought back after a little bit of tweaking. We had a couple of revisions. I didn't get any other feedback from council in terms of things they wanted added. We'd be looking for approval of this tonight if the council wanted to do that.
Oh, it's good to get some of those things clarified. It's gonna help us with some of our development and avoiding issues that we've had before of where things are at, where they should have been or shouldn't be.
One thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight this rule set on the city website as a kind of a pop-up, so that at least we try to do that right now, like the aquatic center's featured. We'll be featuring this for a couple of weeks, so when people first come to the website, they can click on it. So just so they familiarize themselves with it, because it is a public document. We want people to see that, have that opportunity, and then that's kind of a useful thing for the website, is being able to popularize things.
Okay, thank you. Any other feedback from council on that? Everybody get a chance?
Requirement of publication for this, or no?
No, it's a rule set, so
Okay.
there isn't a required publication as if it was an ordinance or anything like that.
Thank you.
Just think it just gives our department the guideline to continue. So, any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, and tell yourself and Jared, thanks for putting that stuff together. Appreciate it.
Jared did the bulk of it, so I appreciate that.
Yep. Number 4, cast and rate study projections for our electric.
Sure. And so you've got this information. Obviously, at our last meeting, we talked about some bad news. We had a MISO auction, and I shared some information with you. We're seeing it all over the country, substantial rate increases, and it is what it is. So we have to kind of get around that and do what we can to try to mitigate things. So you've got 3 documents there. You've got the operating results as estimated without South Fork. I've indicated earlier that due to the nature of our last service agreement with the folks at Peoples, That's not gonna be acquired. That was originally factored into our rates for this year. We didn't, I didn't realize that we weren't gonna be able to acquire that, so in a way it helps us, because that would have been a large cost we would have added. So you've got that document, as well as the, there's two options here, or scenarios that Mr. Miller from MRES has sort of guided towards, and I'm not looking for any action tonight, but just so you can see the numbers, and the kind of the second page of each one of those kind of goes through what his recommendation would be. As you'll note, this year we had a 2% increase. In the one option, they're recommending 5% increase in '23 and '24, and in the other option, option 2, let's see here, they're recommending
Just 5 and 23.
just a 5. So, basically what it would be is just a matter of what fund balance that we feel is appropriate. You can see the net income as a percentage of operating revenues. That's kind of what we use as a guideline for all these type businesses that we operate, electric, all of our utilities. We would try to have that margin. Part of the positive for us is that because the MISO auction was in April, we started having those higher costs in May, which means that while we operate in a calendar year, our costs would be, just over half a year would be borne this year, and we would have that other half of it borne next year. So, we're gonna see this large jump, but only half of it would be paid by our utility this year. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility, as opposed to doing a mid-year rate increase. We would be looking at reconciling at the end of the year.
All right, so there's no rate adjustment, we're asking for an emergency rate adjustment for 20.
Well, and unless the council would like to do that.
I'd rather not.
I know, that's a good answer. I would rather not either, because, unlike a lot of here's the thing, a lot of the other utilities are doing exactly that, though.
Right.
The natural gas utility basically just said, hey, we're gonna do a 20% recapture of all this cost we had last year, and here it is. And the PUC said, okay, for the most part. I mean, they knocked some of them back a little bit. But my preference would be to do the increase at the end of the year, as we normally do, and hope that next year,
Changes.
we have to see some changes. I have a meeting in person tomorrow with folks from Compass. They're gonna be talking about some of the more long-term options, which would be how we can support that capacity through some longer-term contracts, possibly with other partners in our purchasing group. A couple of the other cities in our purchasing group, Sleepy Eye, Springfield are good examples where they have extra capacity. We could purchase their capacity at a lower rate than we pay on the open market. Now, it costs us something extra, because usually when we buy it for 15 cents, it doesn't cost much, and they'll be getting more than that if we buy their capacity. But we also wouldn't be paying $236 a megawatt. So, it would be a balance of that. So it benefits them, because in a year where their capacity is not worth anything, they're getting something. It benefits us because we don't have to purchase on the open market. And when I look at the options, that seems like the best option to me, at least in the interim period. So, anyway, I'll be meeting with them tomorrow.
You read some of the horror stories of this, there's, people talking about rolling blackouts, or whatever. Are we in danger of that this year, and does that affect our development going forward? Do we keep approving more people coming into our area if we can't buy the power to provide it?
If there are rolling blackouts, it'll affect Excel. It'll affect all of the Excel service area. It'll affect all of the Whippy areas. It'll affect larger markets. Those are the power providers.
Okay.
So if there was an extremely hot day, there could be capacity issues, but those capacity issues would be across the board. So we're not gonna see any higher prices because of the capacity issues. We're already paying the maximum for capacity.
We're already getting it, okay.
So, that'd be my answer to you, is it is a problem long-term. I think that they're very concerned that there's not enough capacity in the whole country.
We're paying for that extra capacity, I get it, but the capacity is there to fulfill what we have to deliver.
Exactly. We're paying at CONUS, yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right, so we'll just keep that under advisement for everybody to kind of think about as we're getting ready to set the fee schedule for 2023 in the fall. This will come back at budget time when we're...
Yeah, and if you have questions of any of these documents, I know it's a lot, just please let me know. I'm always glad to talk through it with you, and Nancy and I will be working on those budgets starting this summer, and we'll have to try and figure some of these calculations in as we go forward with that.
Okay, thank you. On to number 5, old business, Chamber of Commerce event, the permits in the packet for June 3rd. Anybody have any questions on that? I know they had this in here before. We kicked it back and said, no, we don't want the road closed. They're gonna close some of the parking spaces to have some stuff on the street. They'll have it cordoned off there. So any questions on that at all from anybody?
and I know it's not gonna change, I mean, without the road construction going now, is this something they're gonna try to do again next year, have they said?
They're gonna try to incorporate something like this into similar time of the year on their Shop Local Friday. They'll see how it goes this year, and then
Okay.
determine what they'll do going forward, yeah. Is what they said today at the chamber meeting.
Cause I say, now it's not as,
Right. Not as timely.
yeah, but I know they're already into it, I understand that concept, so.
So it's part of their Shop Local Friday
Sure.
event, monthly event anyway, and they're just trying to do something better. And they said today that they'll reevaluate afterwards and see what they'll do next, so.
To that point, the highway's gonna be likely shut down at that point. The downtown area and the roundabouts aren't gonna be in construction, but the highway will be shut down, so.
Right, yeah, the road will still be closed, just to.
Yeah, you'll still be able to get to downtown.
Right.
So it will be an inconvenience, so, to that point.
Okay.
Right.
It's good program.
Yep. So, no questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do I have a second? Thanks, Ryan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. H, new business preliminary TIF requests.
Yeah, and this is kind of an item that I mean, I suppose we could have put this under EDA reports as well, but you're gonna be getting a lot more information on it at our next meeting. These are just the letters, we just shared the basics with you tonight. There's two additional apartment complex projects that are asking for some potential TIF. One is the Warshaw project, it's KHP. It is, it's the historic school project, for a lack of a better word. They're calling it Water Tower Place. They're gonna be looking at market rate housing. They're looking at a substantial amount of historic tax credits with that project. The second one is a project, which would be the Sands Company, which, if you remember from last year, they had applied for their, they've got a workforce apartment community, which has, income and rent restrictions ranging from 30 to 60%. So their project is, gonna be down in the Vale property area potentially. So you can see their ask there as well. So both of these would be pay-as-you-go TIFs, just so we're clear on that. And the way that works is that the increment that's captured is only captured on the new building. So if the new building doesn't happen, there isn't any increment, there isn't any payment made. And the exact length of these is yet to be determined. The Sands folks are asking for 10 years. I suspect that with the redevelopment TIF, so the Sands TIF would be a housing TIF. The other TIF would actually be a redevelopment TIF, the one for the historic school because of the nature of the building. And I suspect that they will ask for a longer period of time with that one, just because there's a greater opportunity to capture the TIF increment. But that's the information I have for you tonight. It's just for you to kind of get it in your mind. We'll have more information coming. If there's any questions you have before the next meeting, I'd be glad to take those. I may not have the answers, but I will try and find out for you.
We're just waiting to hear back from the other parties, so.
That's right.
Yep. Any questions right now on that? Okay, all right, thank you. On to administrator's report.
Okay.
And the police electric vehicles is under there too.
Sure. And I want to thank Amy from our office here who worked a lot on this. She's trying to get Josh some electric vehicles for his fleet. And actually, there's a lot of potential there. We own an electric utility, and there are positives and negatives to electric vehicles. I think one of our council members can tell you about it in more detail than I can. I've only ever driven them. One of the positives, at least potentially from what Amy's found, is that the maintenance should be lower over time. The amount of oil changes, that sort of thing, should definitely drop the cost. But I'll go through my report first before I get into that. Legislative session is kind of entering its final 2.5 weeks now, really. Bonding bill, have not seen anything on yet. The parties are both keeping it very close to their chest, and both of the houses, the House and the Senate, are keeping it close to their chest too on that. It looks like there's some ground on some of the smaller bills so far. It sounds like energy and some of the commerce, some of the smaller, education, for example, sounds like it's going to be pretty positive. It's not a huge bill, but the bill sounds like it's going to conference this end of this week. So I'm just going to try and stay on top of that, and if I get anything good, I will definitely, good or bad, I guess I'll share that with council, one way or the other. And the league is kind of keeping some track of those things too. You've got some information there, like I said, on the TIFs from the EDA. Nancy is going to be participating on the Rethos subcommittee, which is doing an evaluation of a downtown, and actually I don't know, Nancy, if you wanted to share a little bit of information about that.
Well, so we just had an orientation meeting the other day, and kudos to Robert for working through the application, and it's no cost to the city. It's going to be funded by Smith, but I look at it as a great opportunity to look at our lives downtown. But the process is such that it won't take longer than 6 months. They're going to come in and do their work with us, the direct contact, whether it's meeting with groups or meeting with individuals to get that feedback, and they have a structured way to do it. But they'll be essentially on the ground in the city for a week, and then they'll be gone. So the role of our committee at the outset is to help set up whatever those meetings are. And it's going to be in June or July, but they're going to do all the work, and we're excited that it's a short time frame, and we'll see what they come back with. Tim asked a great question the other day. He said, only focus on downtown. Well, because it was just the orientation, the information they want to gather is really about the entire city and what people think we should have, what's needed, what's wanted. Those are my words, not theirs, but it hasn't focused just on downtown. It'll lead to that, but they really want to leave a big blank board and then gather the information, see where it goes, because they're really open to hearing all sorts of ideas and want to hear all sorts of ideas. But I'm excited about the process, that it'll be what I consider a fairly short period of time. So we'll see. We'll keep you posted with updates, too, because we're not sure what our level of involvement is at what point in time either, but there'll be lots of opportunities to review their information before a final program or direction might be selected, or it's just a study. We didn't quite get to that, but I think it'll be really good.
Thanks, Nancy.
What's classified as downtown? Did they say, is it just Main Street, is it so many blocks?
No, that's why Tim asked, I wasn't sure if it's just defined.
Because to me, downtown is more than just Main Street.
Well, and that might come out of the process, but they didn't go into it with a definition, because they're also, that orientation was also with 2 other cities.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Just 2 other things I wanted to highlight. Tennis court project. Obviously, Park and Rec has been dealing with that issue. I mentioned it at the last meeting. So I did meet with the school superintendent to talk about that. He's indicated there might be some interest, so we'll continue working on that. And just wanted to highlight the, last thing here I will highlight would be the Personnel Committee updates. The Personnel Committee's recommended that Chief Hansen proceed with hiring, early hire for the officer that was authorized for 2023 due to staffing issues. We've recently had someone resign, and so we want to try and firm that up. And then they also are looking at, they've asked us to take a look and formulate the job description for a Park Streets lead position, which would be taking the role of Ron Unger with his retirement. So just want to highlight those things. I'll take any questions on my report then.
Any questions for Tim? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And then I see the time, the clock's clicking down already, but, and I don't want to rush this. So take a look at the electric vehicles, police department, some good information there. It's something that, we may be able to get some funding for as well, so just taking a look at it going forward as a possibility to add to the fleet. There's been some notable successes in other communities in northern atmospheres, northern areas. I mean, some folks say, well, you can only have them in the south. We've got some examples from Indiana and some of the other states, Ohio, where they have winter weather as well, where they've had some success. So I may bring that back at a future meeting just to see if there's any more. We can talk through that, but like I said, I know it's getting late.
Okay. Any questions on that from everybody? Comments?
And then I just had one last other thing. In front of you, you have some information on manufactured homes. We have a home coming in, and you may be getting questions from some residents on that. I did review the permits on that. It's an R1A, which does allow for manufactured homes. They have to meet the criteria. They have to meet it has to be properly permitted, and CMS will be doing inspections there. So just wanted to get that in your hands in case you do have residents that have questions on that. So
Okay, thank you.
And I had a quick question about this. This is
Sure.
different from the house that was built on Second Street?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, that would be, still considered to be like a stick build, kind of manufactured, even though it's kind of modularized.
Modular.
This would be more for, something that's, able to be brought in one or two pieces.
The thing you see coming down the trailer and then the other trailer?
The other half comes
Okay.
this there. Yep. So around the southwest part of town, by the elevator. Okay. Did you have a question on the electric vehicle thing? It was on that thing, okay. All right. On to engineers report.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. 4 items tonight. I'm going to keep them very high level. If you'd like me to go into great detail, I'm more than happy to do that. But with respect to time, I keep them high level because it's stuff that we've talked about in the past. Number one, MnDOT Master Partnership Agreement. There is a group proposed agreement and resolution in your council packet for your consideration. I think all of our municipal stated cities have approved this partnership agreement with MnDOT. Reason why we do that, ultimately it's in the best interest of the city to have MnDOT do some material inspection testing on their side of things. They send us a nominal fee, to pay us and other consultants to do that for you as kind of a little part of the project. So with that, I'm recommending consideration of the resolution. Because we do have some of these projects that are going to utilize MnDOT to do some of these, specifically concrete and bituminous asphalt plant inspections. So with that, I would ask for your consideration of the resolution.
Okay. Are there any questions for Brandon on that?
And again, it just is an agreement that sets us in place, and if we do a project, then we would work with MnDOT to actually incur the cost, so.
Right.
So it's not really locking in any cost at this time.
And it's a MnDOT requirement, so.
Correct, yep.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the MnDOT required resolution.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Resolution passes.
Thank you. Second item, Trunk Highway 57 reconstruction. We're kind of off and running. We had a pre-construction meeting with MnDOT and the contractor and some of our staff and city staff, so it's off and running. If you follow the city social media, the project website, or if you're signed up for the email updates, you already know this. But next Thursday, May 19th, we're going to have an open house for the public to kick off construction. Ultimately, we're going to go through the construction project, but big picture for the council tonight, the highway is going to be closed that we talked about, starting here this spring into this end of this construction season, and then for some time next spring. That is going to be closed. It'll be open during the winter months. We are going to phase the project as it's currently planned now. I think first phase was kind of the downtown area. We're actually going to push that off till 2023. We're not able to secure some of the materials we need to go through the contaminated material in our downtown area. So we're currently proposing, or the contractor's currently proposing, starting at First Street North, 1 block north of Main Street, going up to 11th Street, which is kind of our high point, our pool area there, our park area. Do that ultimately till July, August timeline, and then after the fair closes down in the middle of July, do 7th to 11th, the north end of the project along the fairgrounds, and complete that this fall. And then, like I said, next spring, come down, start at County 34, across the road tracks into Main Street, and wrap the project up. I think July is the completion date. So that's the big picture phasing. That's what we were expecting as we saw some of the material shortages during the bidding process, and kind of saw this coming, and I think that is ultimately going to be the construction schedule. So that is just the information meeting again tomorrow, or a week from tomorrow, Thursday the 19th, 4 to 6. Any questions you may have?
Will they know at that time, or do they know now? So 1st to 7th, is that to 7th, and 7th will still be open? Or is it including 7th, where the only way to get across from east to west is going to be Main Street or 34?
Good question. That includes the south and the 7th. So Phase 1, 7th will still be open, and then obviously Main Street will still be open.
Okay.
Then after the fair, we're going to knock out 7th Street intersection, then you'll be able to use the other roads.
Right,
if you
okay.
will. So.
And then this is just for pool access and everybody else access. This is more of a city, but we're gonna have to work with the contractor to make sure that it's safe crossing for everybody that wants to get to the pool in the summer. I mean, I just
That's
don't
what I
know.
was asking, because 7th will still be open until they do that second phase.
Correct.
After the fair.
Yep, it'll be after the fair, so it'll be later July by the time they jump up there, so. It'll be a month and a half.
Realistically, it'll actually reduce the traffic going north and south, but you're absolutely right. We'll still be posting a crossing walk person there to monitor that corner, because you're gonna see much more, you're gonna see folks who are gonna turn on to 7th and go across south of the pool.
Right.
So, it cuts down on probably the speed of traffic, because people tend to kind of accelerate through there, but we're still planning on doing the same thing we did in the past, to make sure that kids are safe.
And I just wanted to make sure the construction crews understood that there's gonna be a lot of kids going through
Yeah,
this.
so during the first phase, when we're just south of Seventh, we're gonna have a lot of local traffic taking Seventh to that point of that additional traffic there with our pedestrian facilities, so. And after
Until
that,
they all get stuck at the stop sign and realize that's not the wisest way to go.
Yep, I think
Stop
having.
sign.
Go to the light.
I think
But I
the
just-
schedule, the previous schedule, we actually had Main Street, being knocked out at that time and forcing everybody to Seventh, that we have that alternative access is gonna be open at Main Street, so that should help. But at the end of the day, we are going to have a lot of that traffic using Seventh. Perfect. Okay. But I think it'll all work out, in the grand scheme of things, so. Any other questions on the, kickoff meeting again, next Thursday here at City Hall?
Who's gonna be attending it as council people, because we, 3 or more, we have to post as a quorum?
I would just go ahead and post it
Just post
regardless.
it.
Yeah, I would too, 'cause as of now, I'm planning on it, but it could change.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Linda.
Can we bring a jump drive and plug it in and talk to that
There'll
one?
be no jump drives. We are gonna have a big rollout of the plans, and then MinDOT and the contractor are gonna be here talking about some of the phasing, so.
Sorry.
The second item tonight, again, Highway 57 reconstruction, amendment to our agreement with MinDOT, that is ultimately a cost share. We talked, I think, 2 meetings ago, because I think I missed the last meeting. MinDOT did remove the cap, so it's just a FYI for the council that this is the signed agreement that removed the cap, so. And we did receive our bill from MinDOT today, so I think Nancy's got all the bonds, so we've, are in the process of paying.
We got the money yesterday, and we got the bill today from the state, so.
Perfect timing,
We got the
so.
money today, and we got the invoice today, which you'll see in your next packet. So we received about 5.9, which is net of some of those closing costs, and 3.1 will be going out to the state, so.
Okay.
They seem like, the state seems like they know exactly when they were the money. I don't know.
They've got a good track.
All right.
Do you need an approval on that amendment, or just amendment?
Nope, it's already
Okay,
processed,
all right.
so that was just a FYI.
Perfect. Thank you.
No action required. All right, moving on, 57, unless any objections?
Nope.
All right, 16th Street Roundabout, in your council packet, is a long, geometric, display, what we call it. I'm gonna talk kinda just around the intersection and use kind of the highlighted, roundabout area there, and just kinda go around the intersection. North is to the right. You can see the high school on the southeast corner is the lower right corner there. So we do have ultimately a small portion of the school property that the school has conveyed for right-of-way for the trail section there. We worked with the school on the driveway to remain there out only there, as you see that orange driveway as you leave the high school there. That's kind of the highlights in the northeast corner of the intersection. The southeast corner of the intersection, again, lower left corner there, you can see that house still in the aerial photo there, that our roadway and trails going through. That ultimately is a building we bought a couple of years ago and took down. So that portion there is gonna be obviously used for right-of-way. Along the southwest quadrant of the intersection, yeah, Tim, you gotta move, zoom into the kind of the pretty colors there.
Yeah, I will, we'll figure it out here. All right, you can zoom in.
Okay.
Again, upper left
Luckily
of
we have
that,
clear.
the southwest corner of the intersection, that's the open field, Mr. Schuette's property that we've, have some agreements in place with respect to him conveying right-of-way.
There we go.
And future cost. I know you got it rotated there, Tim, so.
I didn't rotate it, that was Linda. Can't blame me.
I didn't mean to rotate it.
All right, so we'll just keep going here. So we have.
There we go, all right, she's
Yep.
got it now.
That open field there you see to the southwest, as Schuette, we got the right-of-ways conveyed for Mr. Schuette along with the cost participation for future construction with 16th Street leg. You can see the leg going to the west, at the top of the screen there, starting to show the first intersection. That's what we're planning to build as part of this project. So we're gonna build up to that first intersection, and then we're not gonna build what we're calling future roadway or the backage road. We're just gonna wait to see how development pressure in that area ultimately comes forward to the city, and then we'll make that determination at that time. We did want to get that road stubbed out far enough that Mr. Schuette, if he was to develop, that we kind of had him set up ready to go, because we have an agreement in place for him to incur some of that cost. That's kind of the west leg. We are gonna continue the trail farther than what's shown here, to connect in ultimately the next project. We're gonna talk about safe routes to school, with the idea that when this roundabout is completed and our safe routes to school project is completed, we're gonna have a contiguous trail system along 16th Street. So that'll be done in place, so we can have a nice trail system to tie our sunrise and sunset trails together. So that's kind of the highlights of the west leg. You can see moving on to the northwest part of the intersection there, the Cunningham property. We've been approached, or evidently the Cunningham property is in transition to be a Quick Trip. So we've worked with Quick Trip through this process, and you can see a new access there, kind of that yellow little offshoot from the southbound 57 traffic north of the roundabout there, that's gonna be a right-in. So we've been working with MnDOT and Quick Trip to ultimately approve entrances, so we've gotten to the point now, we're proposing kind of final approval, for that entrance. Quick Trip's okay with that, then they're obviously gonna be, entering onto our 16th Street. I mean, in orange there's a new access to serve the other two properties there, that's the Foot and Toon property. So I've met with, Mr. Foot, and talked to Mr. Toon about that entrance, so we're still kind of working out some of the geometrics there, whether or not, you kind of turn in and take a left, or we go north there's some city right away and kind of come into the backside of Foot. We're still working that through, but ultimately, I envision that those two properties would go to that future backage road at some point, but we're not quite there yet, but that would be like a future construction. That's the northwest quadrant. I think ultimately just looking for review and comment tonight because this is in the process of being a final approval of MnDOT, so I wanted, if there's any council concerns, questions, to kind of get them out now, or let me know if there's any issues so we can incorporate that into our design. But other than that, I'm kind of excited to see it moving forward. We've kind of struggled here between MnDOT and Quick Trip and everything in motion, and Quick Trip wanting everything hammered out, and MnDOT wanting everything hammered out. We've worked through that. The timeline is to bid this project later on. We talked about some funding. The state's funding this, I think about $900,000, and our municipal state aid funds, we're gonna kind of pick up the rest that was eligible. MnDOT said that we can push the funding into the next fiscal period, so that's not at risk. So I envision that we finalize the plans. We're pretty close with MnDOT, maybe bid it this fall into winter, and then not shut down the roundabout or the intersection until next spring when the highway shut down, and then wrap both projects up about the same time, so we don't have an extended detour with the construction. So that's kind of what I've envisioned on my side of things. Maybe we'll get some of the work done this fall and the extension going to the west or the trail. We may leave that open as an option, just see how things kind of work out moving
Or
forward.
we wouldn't close this intersection until school is out next spring?
We may close it down next spring.
Before school's out?
Before school's out.
Have that closed and Main Street and 34 all at the same time?
Potentially. We have it set up now as that now with the 57 project, so.
I think obviously we'll have to try and figure out that schedule a little bit harder once we get closer to
Yep,
it.
we'll work that out.
I mean, that would be,
Because if we-
that would be problematic.
If we delay it, then we're gonna have, you're gonna extend the detour on 57, which is not ideal either.
So to access anybody on the west side of town or anywhere coming from the south, you'd have to go all the way to Manorville, go the golf course road, and come back around to come to the elementary or middle school.
That's what it's set up right now.
Unless you cut through the high school parking lot.
Yep.
Okay.
Speed bumps are a little, anyway.
Rules.
And Excel, is there confirmation that they're moving the poles in time, or?
Yeah, they are in the process.
schedule?
We met with them, and, we're kinda good to go. We got everything laid out, so we should.
Should've just waited and just built it anyway and asked for forgiveness later.
No comment.
It's working for the apartments.
Kinda right in our way. It's a little different. We're just building underneath of them, so.
Yeah.
So again, funding's not an issue. MnDOT's kind of moved their funding around. We'll use our municipal state aid money we talked about previously, wrapping up. And then I have talked to the school about the schedule and told them next spring, so.
Okay.
We'll work that out. If we think we need to change that, we'll work with the school and figure it out. Yeah.
A lot of it's gonna be when you get the bids and when we say, you know, I imagine a lot of the work can be done without closing the road, the prep work and stuff on the side.
Yeah, the road to the west. And the other thing is, you know, even if we have a construction project that has whatever the schedule may be, maybe it's all right, you can start in the west, you can't close the intersection down. When you close the intersection down, get it done, and then
Right.
finish up in the west. We don't really, I mean, we care about the work to the west, but it's not as time sensitive as the intersection itself, so. We'll work that out and figure it out as we go, so.
Yep, I mean, it is what it is.
Other than that, kind of things are falling into place. Wanted to talk about the high-level stuff, and again, any other review and comments, let us know. Obviously, we'll be back at a later date to go out for bids for the project that we'll talk about in the next phase here.
I'm sure you answered this before. How far to the south does it go? I mean, we're going north to 11th with our construction. How much space in between?
About 2 blocks.
Yeah, that might be a little more than that. So, my recommendation to the council, and MnDOT's asked this question of like, hey, what about the little section between, let's pave it. My response, we don't have any utilities in that section of roadway. We really don't have any interest of doing any work in that roadway with respect to city end up incurring more costs of the roadway.
State could just mill and overlay it?
That's kind of my thought. I mean, at the end of the day, the state was planning, you know, years ago to mill and overlay from 34 all the way into Manorville. And we've kind of muddied that waters, if you will, of our reconstruction project, but I think it's the right thing to do, along with our roundabout. So there's still gonna be not only this section, but between the roundabout into Manorville too, to the bridge, that MinDOT's gonna have to figure out, is my opinion. We don't have any utilities, it's not in our interest. If we get involved, we'll end up incurring some costs. And if you wanna provide a different direction, I'm more than happy to take that direction, but...
Their street.
I was just curious where we were, so.
Yep. Good, thanks, Brandon.
All right, I think that covered about everything
Perfect.
with that item.
Safe routes to
Safe.
school.
Yep.
Cover that?
Yep, I'll cover that right now if you guys are
You
good.
bet, let's do
All
it.
right, so the last item, safe routes to school. In your council package is construction plans and advertising for bids and a resolution to ultimately accept the bids and go out for, accept the plans, and then authorize us to advertise for bids. With the caveat that this is conditional of MinDOT final approval. We have $300,000 of MinDOT federal funding involved that we solicited and received. So we got some more kind of hoops to jump through there. So I'm not gonna go through the plans in detail. You know, staff has reviewed them. We sent them to the school, they've reviewed them. And it's consistent with the Safe Routes to School planning grant we had some years ago. So I'll just talk off the title sheet here on what we're looking at doing. So I don't know, Tim, Linda, if you wanna pull open the title sheet here, but that kinda has an area of the maps there. I just got it pulled open. I'll start on the northwest side.
J41,
Was it?
J41.
J4I, right there, yep, that'll be great. So that is an aerial there showing, kind of the area that we're looking at building some stuff. We got a lot of stuff going on in a lot of areas, so let's quickly kind of go over them. Area G, kind of, I'll start in the northwest corner and kind of work around clockwise. Area G there, that's the trail I mentioned as part of the roundabout project. We're gonna go kind of along the south side of the dump there to connect in, County 21, the dump road, into our, roundabout trail project, again, to provide a contiguous trail project. Area A there is 16th Street and 5th Avenue. That is a busy little intersection, as we all know. There we're looking at bumping those sidewalks out slightly, not as much as we had that demonstration project with some of those bollards that I know caused some problems. And Charlie and I actually went out there and placed some cones where the new curb line was, and a lot of those buses were able to make the movement, so we verified that it was gonna be navigable with the buses, with the idea that we still wanted to pull those in slightly so we could add some pedestrian benefit. We're gonna add a pedestrian flasher system there. Our 16th Street corridor is kind of flasher heavy, but it's ultimately a lot of pedestrian traffic at some higher speeds, so that was one of the other items we added into the project. Moving to the east on 16th Street, Area B, same thing there, at a ped crossing, because we do see a lot of pedestrian traffic there at that mid-block crossing, going to the northeast corner of the elementary school. So we do have added a pedestrian crossing there, and then our Area H includes a trail going up to kind of the front door of Community Ed there on the northeast side of the elementary school. Continuing to the south of the elementary school, including a trail kind of from the southeast trail section of the school tying into the residential subdivision off of 10th Street northeast. Not only is it going to serve that residential area, but as the area to the east develops, we envision a trail system tying into that trail system, and I think it's going to be a great asset to not only our contiguous trail system now, but that development to the east there. So that's Area H. Continuing to the south, Area D there, which is 5th Avenue, 11th Street. Pretty minor improvement there, but just adding a pedestrian ramp where a trail comes out that I think was kind of lost in some of the old construction projects, but making sure the ADA folks can navigate our pedestrian facilities there in Area D. Area C and E, that's what, when we did the Safe Routes to School planning, was called the Goat Trail. It's a path that the kids use to kind of walk through the fairgrounds there behind the horse arena, so we're just going to pave that out, because our opinion is if kids use it, let's pave it, so they don't get muddy boots. And so we got an easement from the Fair Board to build that, along with a crossing there at Area C. And then finally, Area F there, that trail currently at the middle school kind of dead ends there at the north side of the ice arena, so we're going to extend that trail over to our Highway 57 project, and we're going to add some pedestrian facilities on 57 on the west side, and then if we see some development pressure farther to the west, again on Shooties there, that we can have a nice trail and sidewalk system there for that project. So that's the real high level on what we're doing. Again, I'm not going to go into the plans unless you'd like me to. With that said, answer any questions, and again, there is a resolution to go out for bids. Currently, we have scheduled June 16th to bid the project, and again, I'm asking for some conditional approval that we got to get final MinDOT blessing, which actually I think I got today in my email inbox, just haven't reviewed it, so I think we're in good shape there. And then we may have to tweak this slightly just to meet any requirements and some of the DBE goals that they have in here, so would ask that as part of your consideration tonight.
Is Area C gonna have flashers or anything? That's the, goat trail over to the middle school.
Yes, actually it is.
Good.
Yep.
It needs it.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of kids that use that trail, so.
There's a fair amount of kids that just walk right in front of you
Yep.
because they don't think about it.
I will say, we probably flashes on there, so they're great for pedestrians, but it also slows down traffic, so I just wanted to make it clear that, you know, at that Fifth Avenue and 16th Street intersection with that flasher there, kid walks through, hits it, next kid comes through, hits it, and it's continually flashing. I think a crossing guard, I know has been discussed and, you know, been kinda kicked around, that might be something that we have to look at. Just one of those things where you're balancing traffic moving through the intersection, we talk about buses getting through there, the school's concerned about, and kids getting across there. It's been just kinda balancing everything there,
It's just kids. Kids don't wanna talk or walk next to each other, they walk 12 foot spaced out, so you get every 12 feet they come across.
And one will run and the next one will drag his feet.
Yeah. No, this has been a long time coming, this has been worked on for probably as
5
long
years?
as I've been on the council for 5
5
years,
years.
6 years, so.
Yeah, that's when we started.
So anytime we chase after this money, it just takes so long to get it
Absolutely.
all delivered, so.
Any questions for Brandon on that? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution to go out for bids.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That's it, we'll see you
Thanks,
next Thursday.
Brandon. Appreciate it. On to K, personnel resignation of firefighter Cole Mickow. So we have a letter from the chief there. I'd like to thank Mr. Mickow for his service. I'll entertain a motion to accept his resignation.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And just a comment on that, you know, firefighters are city employees.
That's right.
And I know with other city departments, we've had in the past an exit interview process. Are they included in that?
Not to
Where
my knowledge.
they would meet
From
with-
my perspective, I don't know if the chief does an exit interview with them.
Okay.
I can check and I'll let you know.
Something the personnel committee can talk about sometime.
Yeah.
Find out why everybody's leaving. Nothing for the attorney tonight? Thank you for that great report. Appreciate it. On the correspondence, any questions on the correspondence from anybody? Okay, our next meeting is in 2 weeks from tonight at 6 o'clock. I believe we've got, the special assessment,
I think we're gonna shift that to June.
because we got started a little late on the project.
Yeah, we've got a few other things that'll be on that
Okay.
agenda that night.
To that point, I may ask for some direction on that, because we got the revised costs now in the breakdown, so I can kind of rerun the assessment numbers, see where they're at. You know, we're at a number, we have more costs
Gotcha.
incurred, so the question to the council is gonna be, do we want to increase the assessment, do we want to stay where we're at? Those sort of
We're
conversations.
gonna have some discussions at the next meeting, but not have the public hearing or the...
Correct.
Until the
And the other thing
following.
is, there's a chance I'm gonna be traveling that day, chance I don't get back, so I didn't really want to schedule an assessment hearing on it.
Okay, I know we're late because the whole project got
We
delayed.
definitely want Brandon there for the assessment hearing, I think.
Better
Right,
take the
Brandon?
shots, right?
You should be the only one here.
Oh, open house.
Oh. Okay, and with that, our meeting's in 2 weeks. Appreciate everything everybody does, staff, council. Sometimes you don't get the appreciation you deserve, so. Entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We're adjourned.
Gives you perfect.
Those opposed can stay if they want.